Hello, wonderful people. Welcome to Ben 10 What If, your story destination. We have an absolute treat for you today. What if Ben 10 was a student at Hogwarts? If you're enjoying these stories, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps the stories coming. With that said, let the adventure begin. Chapter 2, Aliens Among Wizards. Ben's alarm screamed at him from the bedside table. He slapped it quiet and squinted at the time, 5:30 a.m. Groaning, he pulled himself upright and glanced around the unfamiliar dormitory. 3 weeks at Hogwarts and he still woke up disoriented, expecting his bedroom ceiling in Bellwood instead of the deep blue canopy of his Ravenclaw four-poster. "You're actually getting up," mumbled Terry, his roommate, from beneath a pile of blankets. "McGonagall's accelerated program is brutal, mate. Tell me about it." Ben stretched and winced at the soreness in his arms. Yesterday's transfiguration practice had left every muscle aching. "But if I don't catch up to 5th year level by Christmas, they're sticking me with the first years permanently." The thought alone was enough to get him moving. Being 16 and sitting in classes with 11-year-olds for the past weeks had been humiliating enough. Ben grabbed his wand, aspen with a Thunderbird tail feather core, 12¼ inches, and headed for the bathroom. Cold water shocked him awake as he splashed his face. The Omnitrix gleamed on his wrist, its green light pulsing softly in the dim bathroom. Sometimes he still couldn't believe he was here, in a castle full of actual wizards, learning magic. Just another day in the life of Ben Tennyson, he muttered to his reflection. Aliens, sure. Magic? Why not? 30 minutes later, Ben stood alone in an empty classroom, wand raised at a feather that stubbornly refused to levitate. Wingardium Leviosa, he said for what felt like the 100th time. The feather twitched, rose half an inch, then flopped back to the desk. Come on. Professor Flitwick had assured him that mastering first-year spells would get easier with practice, but Ben was beginning to have his doubts. His wand movement felt awkward, unnatural compared to the instinctive way he used the Omnitrix. "You're flicking too hard." Ben spun around. Elara Winters stood in the doorway, her Ravenclaw robes immaculate despite the early hour, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Since his sorting, she'd appointed herself his unofficial guide to all things Hogwarts. "I've been at this for 20 minutes, Ben grumbled. "It's all in the wrist." She demonstrated with her own wand. "Like you're conducting an orchestra, not swatting a fly." Ben tried again, copying her motion. This time, the feather wobbled upward, hovering unsteadily at eye level. "Yes." He pumped his fist, causing the feather to drift sideways. "Not bad, Tennyson." Elara perched on a nearby desk. "For someone who didn't know magic existed a month ago, you're making decent progress." "Decent isn't good enough." The feather drifted back down as his concentration broke. "I need to be great." "Impatient much?" Elara raised an eyebrow. "Most wizards take years to, I don't have years." Ben paced the room. "Every day I'm stuck doing baby magic is another day I can't properly help people. Back home, I'd have solved 3 alien invasions by now. There's more to being a wizard than waving a wand and saying funny words, you know." "Yeah, there's also wearing funny robes and eating food that appears out of nowhere." Elara narrowed her eyes. "You really think that's all this is?" Ben sighed, running a hand through his hair. "No. Sorry. I'm just frustrated. Everything came naturally with the Omnitrix. This." He gestured to the feather, "feels like learning to walk again." Her expression softened. "Have you tried, you know?" She glanced at the Omnitrix. "What, transforming to do magic?" Ben shook his head. "That feels like cheating." "Is it cheating to use every tool available?" "Magic isn't just about raw talent, it's about understanding." Ben frowned, considering. "I guess gray matter or brainstorm might help me figure out the theory faster." "Exactly. Meet me in the library after breakfast." We'll try a different approach. The great hall buzzed with morning conversations as Ben loaded his plate with eggs and bacon. The enchanted ceiling showed a clear autumn sky, sunlight streaming through the tall windows. Tennyson. A voice called from the Slytherin table. Callum Blackthorne stood up, his perfect posture and immaculate uniform making him look like he'd stepped out of a wizard fashion magazine. Several other Slytherins snickered as he approached. What now, Blackthorne? Ben didn't bother looking up from his breakfast. Heard you're starting remedial potions today. Callum's voice carried just enough to ensure nearby students could hear. Professor Slughorn mentioned preparing something special for the developmentally delayed student. Ben stabbed his fork into a sausage. Didn't realize you kept such close tabs on my schedule. I'm flattered. Just wondering if you'll be using one of your monsters to help you. Since you can't seem to manage actual magic. Ben glanced up, meeting Callum's steel-gray eyes. They're aliens, not monsters. And unlike some people, I don't need to show off every 5 minutes to feel important. Callum's pale cheeks flushed pink. At least I belong here, Tennyson. You're just a novelty, McGonagall's charity project. Ben stood, keeping his voice level despite the anger bubbling up. Wanna test that theory? Dueling Club starts next week. Sign up, and we'll see who belongs. A flash of uncertainty crossed Callum's face before his trademark sneer returned. Looking forward to it. He turned, black robes swishing dramatically as he rejoined the Slytherin table. You shouldn't let him get to you, Elara said as Ben sat back down. He doesn't. He's just a rich kid with daddy issues. A rich kid with daddy issues whose father has the minister's ear. Elara lowered her voice. The Blackthorns have been influential in wizard politics for centuries. Callum might be a prat, but he's a connected prat. Ben shrugged. I've dealt with worse. Your alien battles and our world aren't the same, Ben. Some enemies can't be punched into submission. No, but a little public humiliation might knock him down a peg. Elara sighed. Just be careful. Wizard duels aren't like your transformations. They follow strict rules. Rules I'm gonna learn. Ben checked his watch. Library in 30. Make it 40. I need to finish an arithmancy chart. The Hogwarts library seemed to defy the laws of physics, with towering shelves that stretched impossibly high and corridors that led to reading nooks that couldn't possibly fit within the castle's dimensions. Ben found Elara at a table nestled between ancient runes and magical theory sections. Ready to try your idea? Ben asked, dropping his bag on the table. Elara nodded. First, explain what's hardest about casting spells. Connecting intention to action, I guess. I know what I want to happen, but the magic doesn't flow right. Exactly. Your problem isn't power, it's precision. Elara pushed a stack of books toward him. These cover magical theory for 1st through 3rd years. I'm thinking if you transform into one of your smarter aliens, I can process the information faster and maybe find patterns I'm missing. Ben nodded, already reaching for the Omnitrix. Let's try it. Wait. Elara grabbed his wrist. Not here. Madame Pants will have a fit if a grey alien starts flipping through her books at superhuman speed. Ben grinned sheepishly. Good point. Where then? Room of requirement. 7th floor. It'll give us exactly what we need. 20 minutes later, Ben stood before a blank wall as Elara paced back and forth, her eyes closed in concentration. Suddenly, a door materialized, ornate and ancient-looking. Whoa. Ben touched the door, half expecting his hand to pass through it. Come on. Elara pulled the door open, revealing a cozy study room with comfortable chairs, a large table, and walls lined with books. Perfect. Ben wasted no time. He activated the Omnitrix, scrolling through his alien roster. Going gray matter. His brain can process information way faster than mine. In a flash of green light, Ben transformed. Where the teenage boy had stood, there was now a 6-inch gray alien with bulbous eyes and an oversized head. Fascinating spatial manipulation, Gray Matter said, his high-pitched voice analyzing the room. This appears to exist in a pocket dimension with malleable physical properties. Elara blinked. You really do get smarter. Galvan intelligence operates at approximately, Gray Matter caught himself. Sorry. Let's focus on the books. What followed was 3 hours of the most intensive study session Ben had ever experienced. As Gray Matter, he absorbed the content of entire textbooks in minutes, cross-referencing theories and connecting concepts across different magical disciplines. When that form timed out, he switched to Brainstorm, the crab-like cerebrocrustacean whose electrokinetic brain brought new insights to magical energy manipulation. Elara struggled to keep up, jotting notes as Ben rattled off connections between transfiguration principles and charm mechanics, or how potion ingredient interactions paralleled certain alien biochemistry he'd encountered. The fundamental error in my approach, Brainstorm declared, his British-accented voice echoing in the room, was treating magic as an external force to be commanded rather than an energy field to be resonated with. Most fascinating. In English, please. Elara rubbed her temples. The Omnitrix timed out again, and Ben returned to human form, eyes wide with excitement. It's like I've been trying to force magic to do what I want, like I'm fighting against it. But it's more like dancing with it. That sounds stupid. No, it makes sense. Elara leaned forward. Magic responds to intention and emotion as much as technique. That's why accidental magic happens when we're scared or angry. Ben grabbed his wand. Let me try something. He pointed at one of the books, focusing not on the word but on the feeling of the book floating, rising, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Wingardium Leviosa. The book rose smoothly into the air, hovering steadily as Ben moved his wand. Yes. Ben laughed, directing the book to do a little spin. That's incredible. Elara clapped. Try something harder, try the summoning charm. It's 4th-year material. Ben set the book down and walked to the other side of the room. Accio book. The book trembled, then shot across the room, too fast. It slammed into Ben's chest, knocking him back a step. Oof. Need some fine-tuning. But you did it. Elara rushed over. That's a charm most 4th-years struggle with for weeks. Ben grinned, a rush of confidence flowing through him. Let's try more. For the next hour, they practiced increasingly complex spells. Not all worked. His attempted transfiguration turned a quill into something that looked more like a mangled spork than a needle, but his progress was undeniable. This is just the beginning, Ben said, pocketing his wand as they packed up. If I can combine what I learned as Gray Matter and Brainstorm with actual practice, you might catch up to 5th-year level faster than McGonagall expected. Elara checked her watch. We should head down. Quidditch tryouts start in 20 minutes. You're trying out? No, you are. She smirked at his surprised expression. I signed you up yesterday. Every wizard should experience Quidditch, and you need to socialize beyond remedial classes. But I've never even been on a broom. First flying lesson is tomorrow, but I've been watching you. You've got good reflexes, and Ravenclaw needs a chaser. It's worth a shot. Ben hesitated. Between accelerated classes and alien hero duties, did he really have time for magical sports? Then again, flying around on broomsticks did sound awesome. Fine. But if I make a fool of myself, I'm blaming you. The Quidditch pitch stretched out before them, an oval field with 3 tall hoops at each end. Students in blue Ravenclaw robes clustered in the center, some already mounted on broomsticks and hovering a few feet off the ground. Tennyson. Roger Davies, the Ravenclaw captain, waved him over. Elara said you might try out. Ever played before? Not exactly. Roger raised an eyebrow. Ever flown a broom? Also no. Well, this should be interesting. Roger handed him a school broom. We're short on chasers this year, so I'm willing to take a chance if you've got natural talent. Mount up and let's see what you can do. Ben swung his leg over the broom, trying to look confident despite having no idea what he was doing. So I just, kick off. Push up with your legs and lean forward slightly, Elara demonstrated with her own broom, rising smoothly into the air. Ben took a deep breath and pushed off. The broom wobbled alarmingly, then shot upward much faster than he'd intended. Whoa! He gripped the handle tightly as he climbed 20, 30 feet into the air. How do I steer this thing? Lean in the direction you want to go. Roger called from below. Ben leaned experimentally to the right. The broom responded instantly, banking in a tight turn that nearly unseated him. After a few more tentative maneuvers, he started to get a feel for it. It wasn't so different from flying as stinkfly or jet ray, all about weight distribution and subtle adjustments. Not bad, Tennyson. Roger flew up alongside him. Now catch this and try to score. He tossed a red ball about the size of a soccer ball. Ben snatched it from the air. I just throw it through the hoops. While dodging bludgers and other players, yes. Roger pointed to the goalposts. Let's see what you've got. Taking a deep breath, Ben accelerated toward the hoops. The wind rushed past his face as he leaned low over the broomstick, the ground blurring below. This was actually fun. He feinted toward the left hoop, then threw the quaffle hard toward the right one. The ball soared through the center of the hoop. Nice fake. Roger looked impressed. Let's try something harder. Jenkins, Thompson, defend against Tennyson. Barrow, play keeper. What followed was 30 minutes of the most exhilarating sport Ben had ever played. Flying came naturally once he got over the initial weirdness, and years of alien combat had given him incredible spatial awareness. He wasn't the most technical player, but his unpredictable moves and quick reactions made him effective. One last drill. Roger announced. Tennyson, take the quaffle from midfield, avoid the bludgers Smith and I will hit at you, get past Jenkins and Thompson, and score on Barrow. Think you can handle it? Ben grinned, adrenaline pumping through his veins. Bring it on. He took position, quaffle tucked under his arm. At Roger's whistle, he shot forward, immediately having to roll sideways to avoid a bludger that whistled past his ear. Jenkins blocked his path, so Ben dove sharply, dropping 20 feet in seconds before pulling up hard. Thompson appeared on his left, reaching for the quaffle. Ben switched hands, keeping the ball away while executing a tight spiral to shake his defender. Another bludger came straight at his head. He barely had time to jerk the broom handle up, the heavy ball missing his feet by inches. The goal hoops loomed ahead, with Barrow hovering protectively before them. Ben accelerated, then abruptly stood up on his broom, a dangerous move he'd seen professional surfers do. Balancing precariously, he launched himself forward, throwing the quaffle with all his might while simultaneously dropping back onto his broom. The ball streaked through the left hoop as Ben struggled to regain control of his wildly bucking broomstick. Merlin's beard! Roger exclaimed as Ben finally stabilized. That was either brilliant or completely reckless. Probably both, Ben admitted, breathing hard. Well, I've seen enough. Roger extended his hand. Welcome to the team, Tennyson. First practice is Monday after classes. As they landed, Elara rushed over, her eyes wide. That standing throw was insane. Where did you learn that? Picked it up from this surfer in Hawaii last summer, Ben said with a shrug. Figured the principle was the same. You're full of surprises, aren't you? She punched his arm lightly. Come on, we should celebrate. Butterbeer at the Three Broomsticks. First Hogsmeade weekend starts in an hour. What's Hogsmeade? Only the best wizarding village in Britain. Shops, pubs, the Shrieking Shack, it's where students go to escape castle life for a few hours. Sounds perfect. Ben couldn't keep the grin off his face as they headed toward the castle. For the first time since arriving at Hogwarts, he felt like he might actually belong here. Hogsmeade bustled with Hogwarts students enjoying their first weekend of freedom. The main street was lined with shops selling everything from joke products to magical candies, and the autumn air carried the scent of cinnamon and butterbeer. "This place is awesome," Ben exclaimed as they passed Honeyduke's sweet shop, where animated chocolate frogs performed synchronized hops in the window display. "Wait till you try butterbeer." Elara led him toward a crowded pub with a swinging sign depicting 3 broomsticks. "It's like butterscotch soda, but 100 times better." The 3 broomsticks was warm and noisy, packed with students and locals alike. They squeezed through to the bar, where a curvy woman with a pretty face took their order. "2 butterbeers, Madame Rosmerta," Elara said, counting out strange coins, sickles, Ben had learned to call them. Ben tried to pay for his own, but fumbled with the unfamiliar currency. "I've got it," Elara laughed. "You can pay next time." They found a small table in the corner, and Ben took his first sip of butterbeer. The warm, sweet liquid sent a pleasant tingle through his entire body. "Okay, this might be better than smoothies," he admitted. "High praise coming from you." Elara settled back in her chair. "So, feeling any more comfortable in our world?" "Getting there. The magic part is starting to click, but there's so much history and culture I'm clueless about." "That's what friends are for." She smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Oh, I meant to ask, have you noticed anything strange about the Omnitrix since you've been at Hogwarts?" Ben glanced down at the device. "Now that you mention it, yeah. It's been responding differently. Like it's soaking up magical energy or something." "What do you mean?" "Last night, I transformed into Wildmutt to track down that weird smell in the dormitory." "You transformed in the dorm?" "Just for a minute. Anyway, I could suddenly sense magical signatures, like seeing auras or something. Wildmutt's never been able to do that before." Elara leaned forward, fascination lighting her eyes. "The magical environment must be affecting your alien's abilities." "That's incredible. We should document the changes systematically." "Always the Ravenclaw," Ben teased. "I'm serious. This could be groundbreaking magical technology interaction research." Professor Flitwick would. A tremendous crash interrupted her as the front windows of the pub shattered inward. Screams erupted as black-robed figures with silver masks stormed inside, wands raised. "Nobody move," one of them shouted, his voice magically amplified. "We're looking for Ben Tennyson." Ben ducked down, pulling Elara with him. "Friends of yours?" she whispered, eyes wide with fear. "Never seen them before." Ben peered around the table leg. 5 masked wizards had entered, their wands pointed threateningly at the crowd. "But they know me, which is never good news." "They're wearing the insignia of the plumber's bane," Elara whispered, pointing to a symbol on their robes. A stylized wrench snapped in half. "They're extremists who believe magic should dominate technology." "Well, that explains their interest in me." Ben reached for the Omnitrix. "Get ready to run." "Wait." Elara grabbed his arm. "You can't transform here, too many civilians." Before Ben could respond, a bolt of red light blasted their table apart. They scrambled backward as splinters showered around them. "There he is." A masked figure pointed directly at Ben. "Secure the Omnitrix carrier." Ben rolled to his feet, hand hovering over the Omnitrix. "You guys really know how to ruin a good butterbeer." "Surrender the device, boy," the lead attacker demanded, advancing slowly. "It doesn't belong in the hands of a half-blood." "Yeah, I get that a lot." Ben backed up, positioning himself between the attackers and the terrified students. "But the watch stays with me." The leader raised his wand. "Then we'll take it from your corpse." Stupefy. Ben dove sideways as red light shot past him, blasting a hole in the wall. He slapped the Omnitrix dial, green light engulfing him. When it faded, a massive, dinosaur-like alien stood in his place. Humongosaur, he roared, now towering over the attackers. Gasps and shrieks erupted from the pub patrons. Most had heard rumors of Ben's transformations, but seeing it in person was another matter entirely. The masked wizards faltered, clearly not expecting a 10-foot alien. But they recovered quickly, sending a barrage of spells toward Humongosaur. Reducto. Incarcerus. Bombarda. Humongosaur swatted away the binding ropes conjured by one spell, but the explosive hex caught him in the chest, sending him staggering back. It hurt, but not as much as it should have. His tough hide provided some protection against magical attacks. My turn. He stomped forward, growing even larger as he accessed Humongosaur's size-changing ability. At 15 feet tall, his head nearly touched the ceiling. With one sweep of his massive arm, he sent 2 attackers flying through the already broken window. The remaining 3 spread out, casting more complex spells in unison. A glowing net of energy materialized above Humongosaur, dropping down to ensnare him. Oh no, you don't. He grabbed a nearby table and swung it like a baseball bat, disrupting the spell. But the distraction cost him. A cutting hex sliced across his arm, drawing blood. Ben, duck. Elara shouted from behind the bar. He dropped just as she emerged, wand flashing. Ventus Maxima. A powerful gust of wind blasted through the pub, sending the masked attackers tumbling. Humongosaur used the opening to charge forward, grabbing 2 of them in his massive hands. Game over. He slammed them together, their wands clattering to the floor as they fell unconscious. The last attacker backed toward the door, wand trembling slightly. This isn't over, Tennyson. The plumber's bane will cleanse this world of your alien filth. Before Humongosaur could reach him, the man disapparated with a loud crack, vanishing into thin air. The pub fell silent except for the groans of the subdued attackers and the crackle of small fires from misfired spells. Humongosaur looked around at the shocked faces staring at him. Sorry about the mess. The Omnitrix timed out with its characteristic beep, and in a flash of green light, Ben returned to human form. The silence stretched for another beat, then suddenly erupted into cheers and applause. That was bloody brilliant, a Gryffindor 6th year shouted. Did you see him grow? Another student exclaimed. Madame Rosmerta emerged from behind the bar, looking both shaken and impressed. Well, Mr. Tennyson, it seems the rumors about you weren't exaggerated. Sorry about your pub, Ben said, surveying the damage. She waved her wand, and broken furniture began reassembling itself. Not the first magical brawl these walls have seen. Won't be the last. She nodded toward the unconscious attackers. But you might want to explain those to the authorities. On it. Elara had already sent a Patronus message to the castle. Professor Longbottom and Headmistress McGonagall are on their way. Ben slumped into one of the newly repaired chairs, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline crash hit him hard as the reality of what had just happened sank in. You okay? Elara sat beside him, concern etched on her face. Yeah, just processing. Who were those guys really? And how did they know about me? The Plumber's Bane has been a fringe group for years, she explained quietly. They believe wizards should rule over muggles and that all non-magical technology is a threat to wizard supremacy. Great. Magical neo-Nazis. Just what I needed. Your arrival at Hogwarts wasn't exactly low profile, Ben. The Daily Prophet ran a front-page story about the American muggle born with alien powers 2 days after you got here. Ben groaned. Fantastic. Students crowded around their table, peppering Ben with questions about his transformation. How many aliens could he become? Did it hurt? Could they see another one? He was saved from answering by the arrival of Professor Longbottom and McGonagall, who quickly took control of the situation. The unconscious attackers were bound and revived for questioning. Mr. Tennyson, McGonagall said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. It seems you've brought more attention to yourself than anticipated. Not on purpose, headmistress. Her expression softened slightly. No, I don't suppose it was. These men will be turned over to the Auror office for investigation. She surveyed the crowd of excited students. I believe this concludes today's Hogsmeade visit. All students are to return to the castle immediately. Groans met this announcement, but no one dared argue with McGonagall. As the students filed out, Professor Longbottom pulled Ben aside. Are you injured? He asked, genuine concern in his voice. Nothing serious. Ben rubbed his arm where the cutting hex had hit. The wound had mostly closed when he transformed back. Good. We'll discuss this further at the castle, but I want you to know you handled yourself well today. Many students would have panicked. I've had practice with people trying to kill me, Ben said with a wry smile. Longbottom nodded grimly. Yes, I suppose you have. All the more reason we need to accelerate your magical training. Professor, Ben said as they started back toward Hogwarts, do you think they were really after the Omnitrix? Or was it something else? That's what troubles me, Ben. Longbottom's face was unusually serious. The plumber's bane has never been this bold. Something's changed, they're becoming more organized, more dangerous. Just what I needed. Magical terrorists added to my enemies list. You're not alone in this fight. The professor placed a hand on Ben's shoulder. Remember that. News of the attack spread through Hogwarts like wildfire. By dinner, everyone knew Ben had transformed in public and fought off masked assailants. Some versions of the story had him defeating 20 attackers single-handedly, while others claimed he destroyed half of Hogsmeade in the process. And then he picked up 2 of them and cracked their heads together like coconuts, a third-year Hufflepuff was saying enthusiastically at a nearby table. That part's actually true, Ben muttered to Alara as they ate. You're a celebrity now. She nodded toward the stairs and pointing from around the Great Hall. The boy who transforms. Please don't make that a thing. Professor Flitwick stopped by their table, his diminutive form barely visible above the platters of food. Mr. Tennyson, a word after dinner. My office. Ben nodded, wondering if he was in trouble for the public transformation. McGonagall had emphasized the importance of discretion when she'd admitted him to Hogwarts. As dinner concluded, he noticed Callum Blackthorne watching him with an unreadable expression from the Slytherin table. When their eyes met, Callum didn't sneer as usual but gave a slight, almost respectful nod before turning away. What was that about? Ben wondered aloud. Even Callum has to respect taking on 5 dark wizards, Alara replied. But don't get too comfortable, his pride won't let him show it for long. Flitwick's office reflected the charms professor's personality, organized chaos. Books tottered in impossible stacks, magical instruments whirred and clicked on every surface, and what appeared to be a miniature galaxy swirled in a glass sphere on his desk. Ah, Mr. Tennyson. Flitwick climbed onto a stack of books to reach eye level. Quite an eventful day, wasn't it? You could say that, Professor. Most illuminating, your public transformation. Flitwick's eyes twinkled with barely contained excitement. It confirms several of my theories about your unique abilities. Theories, sir. Indeed. I've been studying the magical signatures produced by your Omnitrix since your arrival. Absolutely fascinating energy patterns, unlike anything in wizarding literature. Ben glanced at the instruments scattered around the office. You've been monitoring me? With the headmistress's permission, of course, Flitwick assured him. Non-invasive magical observation only. And good thing too, it helped us detect the magical surge during today's incident. What surge? Flitwick hopped down and retrieved a parchment covered in complex arithmetic equations and wiggling colored lines. When you transformed into that dinosaur creature, Humongousaur. Yes, him. When you transformed, there was a significant magical resonance effect. He pointed to a spike in one of the lines. Your alien form absorbed ambient magical energy from the environment, particularly from the spells cast at you. Ben's eyes widened. That's why the spells didn't hurt as much as they should have. Precisely. Your transformation not only provides physical protection but appears to develop a magical resistance when exposed to spell fire. Flitwick could barely contain his excitement. It's revolutionary. Technology and magic integrating at the biological level. Does this mean all my aliens could absorb magic? That's what we need to discover. Flitwick rubbed his hands together eagerly. With your permission, I'd like to conduct some controlled experiments. Nothing dangerous, just basic spellcasting on various transformations to measure the effects. Ben considered this. If his aliens could absorb and maybe even use magical energy, it would be a significant advantage against threats like the plumber's bane. I'm in, Professor. When do we start? Tomorrow evening, after your classes. Bring Ms. Winters if you'd like, her analytical mind would be most helpful. Flitwick scribbled a note in midair with his wand. Oh, and one more thing. Professor Nyx has expressed particular interest in your abilities. As our defense against the dark arts teacher, she'd like to participate in the testing. Something about Flitwick's tone made Ben uneasy. Is that a problem? Not at all. The tiny professor smiled a bit too quickly. Professor Nyx is highly qualified. Just, keep an open mind. Ben left Flitwick's office with more questions than answers. As he headed back to Ravenclaw Tower, he couldn't shake the feeling that the magical world had more dangers than he'd anticipated, and they were all suddenly very interested in him. Monday morning brought Ben's first defense against the dark arts class with the mysterious Professor Nyx. The classroom was unlike any other at Hogwarts, the walls lined with strange artifacts and specimens in glass jars, and the ceiling enchanted to show swirling nebulae and distant stars. Welcome, Mr. Tennyson, Professor Nyx said as Ben entered. I've been looking forward to meeting you. She was younger than most Hogwarts professors, perhaps in her early 30s, with striking features and silver-streaked black hair cut in a severe bob. Her robes were midnight blue rather than the traditional black, and her eyes, a peculiar violet color, seemed to see right through him. Thanks for having me, Professor. Ben took a seat near the front, aware of the other students watching him. This was a fifth-year class, and he'd been fast-tracked into it based on his practical experience with dangerous creatures. Today we'll be discussing magical resistance, Nyx announced once everyone was seated. Specifically, how certain beings possess natural defenses against spellwork. Her eyes lingered on Ben. Giants, for example, are highly resistant to stunning spells due to their thick skin and magical heritage. Trolls can shrug off most hexes, and dragons require multiple wizards casting simultaneously to subdue. She paced the front of the classroom. But what about beings that can change their nature? Werewolves, animagi, metamorphmagi, their magical resistance shifts with their forms. Ben shifted uncomfortably as more students glanced his way. Mr. Tennyson, Professor Nyx called suddenly. Would you say your transformations grant you different levels of magical resistance? I'm still figuring that out, Professor. A diplomatic answer. She smiled thinly. Perhaps a demonstration would be educational. Ben tensed. What kind of demonstration? Nothing dangerous. A simple shield charm test. Would you be willing to transform into one of your smaller forms? Every instinct told Ben to refuse, but with the entire class watching expectantly, he felt cornered. I guess so. Excellent. Nyx cleared a space at the front of the classroom. Choose a form you believe might have magical properties. Ben considered his options. After his conversation with Flitwick, he was curious about how his different aliens might interact with magic. Diamondhead's crystalline structure might naturally repel spells, or Chromastone could potentially absorb magical energy. All right. He stepped forward and activated the Omnitrix, cycling through until he found Chromastone's silhouette. With a flash of green light, he transformed into the crystalline alien, his body now composed of purple stone with magenta crystals protruding from various points. Gasps and excited whispers filled the classroom. Fascinating, Professor Nyx breathed, studying him intently. A silicon-based life form with energy manipulation properties, if I'm not mistaken. How did you know that? Chromastone asked, surprised by her knowledge of his alien biology. I make it my business to know about all magical and non-magical creatures, Mr. Tennyson. She drew her wand. Now, I'll cast a moderate stinging hex. If you would, please attempt to absorb or deflect it using whatever natural abilities this form possesses. Chromastone nodded, bracing himself. On Earth, he could absorb various energy types and redirect them as powerful beams. Would magic work the same way? Flipendo. Nyx cast, sending a blue jet of light toward him. Instinctively, Chromastone raised his hands, focusing on drawing the energy in rather than deflecting it. To his surprise, the spell connected with his crystals and was immediately absorbed, causing them to glow brighter. It worked, he exclaimed. Now try to channel that energy, Nyx instructed, her eyes gleaming with interest. Chromastone focused, directing the absorbed magical energy to his palms. A beam of light shot out, but instead of his usual rainbow-colored blast, this one was tinged with blue magical energy. It struck the wall, leaving a frost pattern where it hit. Incredible. Nyx clapped her hands together. The spell was not only absorbed but its magical signature remained intact through your body's energy conversion process. The class broke into excited applause and discussion. Chromastone shifted uncomfortably under their scrutiny. One more test, if you please, Nyx said, raising her wand again. A more complex spell this time. Immobilis. The freezing charm shot toward Chromastone faster than he expected. He tried to absorb it as before, but the spell behaved differently, wrapping around him like chains of light. He struggled against the magical binding, focusing his energy into breaking free. With a surge of effort, he channeled power to his crystals, which glowed brightly as they processed the magical energy. The binding spell shattered, releasing him. Most impressive, Nyx murmured. She turned to the class. You see. Different magical signatures interact uniquely with Mr. Tennyson's various forms. The implications for magical theory are profound. The Omnitrix began beeping, signaling timeout. In a flash, Ben returned to human form, feeling slightly drained from the effort of breaking the spell. Thank you for the demonstration, Mr. Tennyson, Nyx said. 5 points to Ravenclaw for your cooperation. You may take your seat. As the class continued, Ben couldn't shake his unease about Professor Nyx. Her knowledge of his alien seemed too specific, too detailed for someone who'd only recently learned of their existence. And the look in her eyes during the demonstration, like a scientist observing a particularly interesting specimen, left him cold. When class ended, Nyx called him back. A moment, Mr. Tennyson. Ben approached her desk cautiously. Yes, Professor. I understand Professor Flitwick has invited you to participate in some experiments regarding your transformations. That's right. I look forward to our collaboration. She studied him with those unsettling violet eyes. Your abilities represent a unique bridge between magical and non-magical worlds. In these troubled times, such a bridge could be valuable. Troubled times? Surely you've noticed. She gestured toward the window, where the peaceful Hogwarts ground stretched out below. The attack in Hogsmeade was only the beginning. The wizarding world is changing, Mr. Tennyson. Old prejudices are resurfacing. New alliances are forming. And where do you stand, Professor? A slight smile curved her lips. I stand for knowledge and progress, of course. As should anyone with gifts as extraordinary as yours. Before Ben could respond, she changed the subject. I understand you've signed up for the Dueling Club. Word travels fast. Hogwarts runs on gossip, Mr. Tennyson. I'll be supervising the club alongside Professor Longbottom. I look forward to seeing how you handle yourself in a formal magical duel. I've been practicing. I'm sure you have. She turned away, effectively dismissing him. Until tomorrow, then. Ben left the classroom with a growing sense that Professor Nyx had plans for him, plans he might not particularly like. The next few days passed in a blur of classes, Quidditch practice, and magical experimentation. Under Flitwick's supervision, Ben tested various alien forms against different types of spells. The results were fascinating. Diamond Head could reflect most curses, Heat Blast could absorb fire spells and amplify them, and NRG proved completely immune to magical attacks but couldn't process the energy like Chromastone. Most surprising was Ghost Freak, who not only could pass through magical barriers but could temporarily possess enchanted objects, controlling them from within. This is groundbreaking research. Flitwick squeaked after one particularly successful session. We're rewriting the fundamental theories of magical technological interaction. Professor Nyx attended most sessions, observing silently and occasionally suggesting more complex spells to test. Her intense focus on the Omnitrix made Ben increasingly uncomfortable. Between experiments, classes, and homework, Ben barely had time to worry about the plumber's bane, though the Daily Prophet reported increased activity from the group. A magical research facility had been broken into, and several artifacts stolen, artifacts that supposedly dated back to the Founder's era. They're looking for something specific, Elara said over breakfast, reading the latest report. The items taken were all related to Ravenclaw's magical experimentation. What kind of experimentation? Ben asked through a mouthful of toast. Rowena Ravenclaw wasn't just brilliant, she was revolutionary. Legend says she studied ancient magic that predated wizardkind, trying to understand the source of magical power itself. Any connection to aliens? Elara bit her lip. I've been researching that. There's an old story about Ravenclaw encountering beings from beyond the stars who shared knowledge with her. Most historians dismiss it as mythology, but now we know aliens have visited Earth before, Ben finished. Azmuth never mentioned any connection to wizards though. Maybe he doesn't know. Or maybe it wasn't his ancestors. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the morning mail. A large barn owl dropped a package in front of Ben, narrowly missing his pumpkin juice. Finally. Ben tore open the package to reveal a sleek laptop and what looked like a modified satellite phone. A note was attached, figured you could use these. Magically shielded by yours truly. Call us. Gwen and Kevin, is that Muggle technology? Terry asked, peering at the devices curiously. It won't work here, you know. Too much magical interference. My cousin's not your average Muggle, Ben said with a grin. She's an Anodite, energy being with magical powers. If she says these will work, they'll work. That evening, Ben set up the laptop in his dormitory. Sure enough, it powered on without issues, connecting to a special network Gwen had created that bypassed magical interference. Her face appeared on the screen almost immediately. Ben. Finally. Hey, cuz. Ben smiled, genuinely happy to see a familiar face. How'd you manage this tech? Combination of legerdemain spellwork and some Galvan modifications Kevin got from Blukik and Dryba. She leaned closer to the camera. How are you? We've been worried since your last letter mentioned an attack. I'm okay. Things have been interesting. Ben filled her in on the Hogsmeade incident, the plumber's bane, and his magical experiments. They're hunting alien artifacts. Gwen's brow furrowed. That's concerning. I'll reach out to some magical contacts, see if I can learn more about these plumber's bane people. And I'll tell Grandpa Max to check if any plumbers have encountered them before. Be careful, Ben. Gwen's expression was serious. Magic users with an anti-alien agenda could be even more dangerous than typical DN alien threats. I'm being careful. Plus, I'm learning actual magic now. Watch this. Ben held up his wand. Lumos. The tip lit up with a steady glow, and Gwen clapped. Not bad. But your wrist movement needs work. Everyone's a critic. Ben rolled his eyes. How are things back home? Quiet, actually. Almost too quiet. Gwen shrugged. A few minor alien incidents, nothing the local plumbers couldn't handle. Kevin's been upgrading the rust bucket 3. They chatted for another 20 minutes before Gwen had to go. Call if you need anything, okay? Kevin and I can be there in hours with the rust bucket. Will do. Tell everyone I said hi. As the screen went dark, Ben felt a pang of homesickness. Despite making progress at Hogwarts, part of him missed the straightforward nature of his old life: hit the bad guys, save the day, get a smoothie. The wizarding world was full of hidden agendas and centuries-old conflicts he was only beginning to understand. A knock on the dormitory door interrupted his thoughts. Tennyson. You in there? It was Callum Blackthorn's voice. Surprised, Ben opened the door. Blackthorn? What are you doing in Ravenclaw Tower? Callum stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. His usual arrogance was muted, his pale face drawn with what looked like worry. I need to talk to you. He glanced past Ben at the empty dormitory. Alone. How did you even get past the riddle on the door? I'm a Slytherin. We have our ways. Callum shifted from foot to foot. Look, are you going to let me in or not? This isn't exactly a hallway conversation. Intrigued despite himself, Ben stepped aside. Callum entered, closing the door behind him. Nice setup, he commented, eyeing the laptop. Granger Weasley's work. I heard she's been developing magic-compatible electronics. Something like that. Ben leaned against his desk, arms crossed. What's this about, Callum? The Slytherin took a deep breath. It's about the plumber's bane. And, my father. Your father. He's one of them. Callum's voice was tight, controlled. A high-ranking member. Ben straightened, instantly alert. Is that why you've been such a jerk to me? Family business? Partially. Callum had the grace to look embarrassed. My father has certain expectations. About blood purity, magical tradition, technology. When you arrived, an American with alien tech, no less, I was expected to make my position clear. And that position was, be a complete prat. I deserve that. Callum ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disheveling it. But I'm not here to apologize, Tennyson. I'm here to warn you. About what? They're planning something. Something big. Callum lowered his voice further. I overheard my father in a fluke call. They found an ancient artifact called the Celestial Codex. It supposedly contains information about entities that visited Earth thousands of years ago, entities that taught early wizards how to channel magic. Ben's mind raced to his conversation with Alara about Ravenclaw. What do they want with it? Father believes it contains rituals that can strip magical beings of their power, or transfer that power to others. Callum's gray eyes were deadly serious. Including the power to control alien technology. Like the Omnitrix, Ben said quietly. Callum nodded. The attack in Hogsmeade was just a test, to see your capabilities, your transformations. The real plan is much worse. Why are you telling me this? Won't your father be furious? Callum turned away, staring out the window at the darkening grounds. My father's obsession has gone too far. The plumber's bane used to be about preserving magical traditions, keeping our world separate and safe. Now they're talking about domination, about using alien power to control both worlds. He turned back to face Ben. I'm a pure-blood supremacist, Tennyson. I won't apologize for believing wizards are special. But what they're planning, it's wrong. It would mean war. Destruction. Ben studied Callum's face, looking for deception but finding only conflicted determination. What exactly are they planning? I don't know all the details. But it involves the Forbidden Forest, the winter solstice, and something called the Lodestar Protocol. Callum checked his watch. I need to get back before my absence is noticed. But watch yourself, Tennyson. And watch who you trust. Even you. A ghost of Callum's usual smirk appeared. Especially me. I'm still deciding whose side I'm on. After Callum left, Ben sat heavily on his bed, mind whirling with this new information. If the plumber's bane could control the Omnitrix, or worse, replicate its technology, the consequences would be catastrophic. He needed to talk to Alara, to research this Celestial Codex and Lodestar Protocol. But first, he needed to contact Azmuth. If anyone would know about ancient aliens teaching magic to humans, it would be the creator of the Omnitrix himself. The question was, would Azmuth bother to answer? And if he did, would Ben like what he had to say? Wednesday brought Ben's first dueling club meeting. The great hall had been transformed for the occasion, with the longhouse tables replaced by a raised platform in the center. Students from all houses gathered around, buzzing with excitement. Nervous? Alara asked as they found spots near the platform. Nah. Ben twirled his wand between his fingers with forced casualness. How hard can it be? Point, say words, don't get hit. There's a bit more to it than that, she laughed. Formal dueling has rules, traditions. It's not just about power, it's about skill and control. You sound like Gwen. Ben scanned the crowd, noticing Callum standing with a group of Slytherins across the hall. Their eyes met briefly before Callum looked away. Everyone's here to see you duel, Alara whispered. Word got out that you signed up. Great. No pressure. Professor Longbottom and Professor Nyx stepped onto the platform. Longbottom raised his hands for silence. Welcome to the first meeting of this year's dueling club, he announced. For those of you unfamiliar with wizard dueling, today will be an introduction to basic techniques and safety protocols. I'll remind everyone, Professor Nyx added, her violet eyes sweeping the crowd, that dueling is about discipline and control. We duel to hone our skills, not to harm our opponents. We'll begin with a demonstration, Longbottom continued. Professor Nyx and I will show you a standard formal duel. Then we'll select volunteers for supervised practice. The two professors faced each other, bowed formally, then assumed dueling stances. What followed was an impressive display of spell work, shields, jinxes, charms, and transfigurations, all cast with precision and control. Neither aimed to truly harm the other, but the power behind their spells was evident. After several minutes, they ended with a respectful salute. The students applauded enthusiastically. Now, who would like to try first? Longbottom asked, looking around. Perhaps, I nominate Tennyson, a voice called out. Ben turned to see Callum stepping forward. And I'll be his opponent. Murmurs swept through the crowd. After their notorious rivalry these past weeks, a duel between Ben and Callum would be the highlight of the evening. Mr. Blackthorn, Mr. Tennyson, Nyx said, a slight smile playing on her lips. Are you both amenable? Ben met Callum's gaze. Was this part of their strange new understanding, or was Callum returning to form? Either way, backing down wasn't an option. I'm in. Very well. Longbottom gestured them onto the platform. Standard rules, no lethal spells, nothing that causes permanent damage, and dueling ends at disarmament or when I call it. As they took their positions, Callum leaned in. Make it look good, Tennyson. My housemates are watching. Don't worry, Ben replied with a grin. I won't embarrass you too badly. They bowed, raised their wands, and at Longbottom's signal, began. Expelliarmus. Callum cast immediately, the disarming charm racing toward Ben. Protego. Ben countered, summoning a shield that deflected the spell. His shield wasn't perfect, more like a flickering bubble than the solid barrier Longbottom had produced, but it held. Ben followed with his own attack. Flipendo. The knockback jinx caught Callum on the shoulder, sending him staggering. He recovered quickly, casting a leg locker curse that Ben barely dodged. They exchanged spells back and forth, each growing more confident as the duel progressed. Ben found himself enjoying the challenge. Dueling wasn't unlike his alien battles, requiring quick thinking and adaptability. Not bad for a beginner, Callum called after successfully blocking Ben's stunner. But you're being predictable. Oh yeah? Ben grinned. Avis. A puño. A flock of birds erupted from his wand, circling briefly before diving at Callum, who had to cast a hasty shield charm. Creative, Callum acknowledged. But amateur. Serpensortia. A large snake materialized from the end of his wand, slithering menacingly toward Ben. The crowd gasped. Conjuring serpents was considered dark magic by some. Mr. Blackthorn, Longbottom warned, but didn't stop the duel. Ben faced the snake calmly. Finite incantatem. Nothing happened, the dispelling charm wasn't strong enough to counter Callum's conjuration. The snake continued its advance. Thinking quickly, Ben pointed his wand at the floor beneath the snake. Glacius. The floor froze instantly, and the cold-blooded snake slowed dramatically, its movements becoming sluggish. Taking advantage of Callum's surprise, Ben cast again. Incarcerus. Ropes shot from his wand, wrapping around Callum before he could raise a shield. With a triumphant grin, Ben followed with a disarming charm, sending Callum's wand flying into his hand. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Ben released the binding spell and walked over to help Callum up, offering his wand back. Clever move with the ice, Callum admitted grudgingly, taking his wand. And the snake was a nice touch. Dramatic. Well done, both of you, Longbottom said, stepping between them. 5 points each to Ravenclaw and Slytherin for an excellent demonstration. As they left the platform, Ben noticed Professor Nyx watching him with that same calculating expression he'd come to distrust. She approached as the next pair of duelists took their positions. Impressive spellwork for someone with only weeks of magical training, Mr. Tennyson, she said quietly. One might almost think you had prior experience. I'm a quick study. Indeed. Her violet eyes seemed to see through him. And so adaptable. Just like your transformations. Ben maintained eye contact, refusing to be intimidated. Was there something specific you wanted, Professor? Merely an observation. She glanced toward where Callum stood with his Slytherin friends. Interesting that Mr. Blackthorn chose to duel you today. His father would be most displeased. Before Ben could respond, she moved away to supervise the next duel. The implication was clear, she knew something about Callum's connection to the plumber's bane. But was she warning Ben, or threatening to expose Callum? The rest of the dueling club passed without incident, though Ben noticed his fellow students giving him respectful nods and impressed looks. Defeating a pure-blood wizard from a prominent family in his first duel had apparently earned him some credibility. As they left the great hall, Elara nudged him. You've got a visitor. Ben looked up to see a familiar gray-furred vulpine alien leaning against the wall, chewing what appeared to be a magical sweet. Several students were giving him a wide berth, though a few brave Gryffindors were attempting to engage him in conversation. Arjit? Ben hurried over. What are you doing at Hogwarts? The alien con man grinned, showing his pointed teeth. Ben Tennyson. Just the hero I was looking for. How did you even get in here? Arjit waved dismissively. Please, a few enchantments can't keep me out. Not when there's profit to be made. Profit? Ben crossed his arms. What are you selling now? Information, my friend. Valuable information about certain ancient alien artifacts that have suddenly become very popular in both our worlds. Arjit's eyes gleamed. Information that'll cost you. I don't have time for your games, Arjit. Fine, fine. Arjit glanced around, then lowered his voice. Let's just say I ran into some cloaked humans asking questions in some very unsavory places. Questions about Galvan technology from the medieval period. Questions about something called the Celestial Codex. Ben stiffened. What do you know about it? Not here. Arjit nodded toward a nearby empty classroom. Too many ears. Once inside, with Alara keeping watch at the door, Arjit dropped his usual smarmy demeanor. This is serious business, Tennyson. These wizard types are offering major cash for alien tech. Old tech, specifically from around 1000 Earth years ago. The Founder's Era, Ben muttered. What exactly is the Celestial Codex? It's not a what, it's a who. Arjit's expression was uncharacteristically grave. The Celestials were a race of aliens who visited primitive worlds, accelerating their development. Earth was one of their projects, about 5,000 years ago. And they gave humans magic? Alara asked from the doorway. Not exactly. Arjit shook his head. Humans already had the potential. The Celestials just focused it. Created the first wands as training tools. Established early magical communities. So wizards are what? Alien experiments. Ben tried to process this information. More like alien protégés. The Celestials saw potential in humans that other species missed. But they left suddenly, some interstellar war called them away. They left behind data caches, the Codex, detailing their experiments and predictions. And the plumber's bane has found one of these caches, Ben concluded. Bingo. Arjit pointed at him. But here's the kicker, the Celestials were masters of genetic manipulation. Their data doesn't just describe human magic. It contains the keys to unlocking, transferring, or neutralizing it. That fits with what Callum told me. Ben paced the room. They want to use this information to control both magical and alien technology. It gets worse. Arjit lowered his voice further. Rumor has it they've also got their hands on Galvan tech from when Azmuth's ancestors visited Earth. When was this? Ben demanded. About 1,200 years ago. A Galvan research vessel spent several decades on Earth, mostly in what you now call the United Kingdom. They were particularly interested in the magical humans, thought they might be evidence of celestial tampering. Did Azmuth know about this? Arjit shrugged. Probably. But you know how he is, if it happened more than last Tuesday, he doesn't think it's worth mentioning. Ben ran a hand through his hair, overwhelmed. So the plumber's bane has both celestial information about manipulating magic and Galvan technology that could interact with it. That's not good. And they're specifically interested in the Omnitrix, Alara added. The ultimate alien technology. Which is why I came to warn you. Arjit held out his hand. That'll be 50 galleons. Seriously? Ben glared at him. Hey, I'm risking my neck here. These wizard types are scary. I'll pay you when this is over, if your information helps. Arjit sighed dramatically. Fine. But I want interest. What else do you know about their plans? Alara asked. Anything about something called the Lodestar Protocol? Arjit's ears perked up. Where did you hear that name? So you know it, Ben pressed. Bad news, that's what it is. Arjit glanced nervously at the door. It's a celestial procedure for large-scale magical manipulation. They designed it as a failsafe. If human wizards ever became a threat, they could remotely deactivate all magical abilities. They can do that? Alara looked horrified. Turn off magic for everyone? Not without the right tools. They'd need a celestial focus crystal, plus something to amplify the signal across the planetary magical field. Arjit's eyes narrowed. Something like a properly modified Omnitrix. Ben felt cold. That's why they've been after me. They don't just want the Omnitrix, they need it for their plan to work. And the winter solstice is when the magical field is most accessible, Elara said quietly. That's less than 2 months away. Arjit headed for the door. Well, that's all I know. I'll be leaving before these lunatics realize I've spilled their secrets. Wait. Ben caught his arm. Where can I find more information about the Celestials? Or the Galvan visits? Try asking Azmuth. Arjit snorted. Good luck with that. Or. He hesitated, then sighed. Check the Department of Mysteries. Word is, they've been studying celestial artifacts for centuries. The Department of Mysteries? At the Ministry of Magic? Elara looked skeptical. No one gets in there without authorization. Not my problem. Arjit shrugged. Anyway, I've done my good deed for the decade. Don't forget my payment, Tennyson. After Arjit slipped away, Ben and Elara sat in stunned silence for several minutes. This is bigger than we thought, Elara finally said. If the Plumber's Bane activates this Lodestar protocol, every witch and wizard could lose their magic, Ben finished. And they could potentially redirect that power however they want. We need to tell the headmistress. Ben nodded slowly. But first, I need to talk to Azmuth. If anyone knows the truth about the Celestials and what his ancestors were doing on Earth, it's him. How do you contact him? I don't. He contacts me, usually when I'm about to die or destroy the universe. Ben stood up. But this time, I'm not waiting. I need to use the special communicator he gave me for emergencies. As they headed back to Ravenclaw Tower, Ben couldn't shake the feeling that Hogwarts itself was watching them, or rather, someone within Hogwarts. The paintings they passed seemed too interested in their conversation, and twice he thought he glimpsed a shadow moving just out of sight. The Plumber's Bane had connections inside the school, that much was clear from Callum's information. But how deep did those connections go? And could Ben trust anyone with what he now knew? One thing was certain, time was running out. The winter solstice was approaching, and with it, a threat to the entire wizarding world. Later that night, Ben stood alone on the astronomy tower, the highest point of Hogwarts. The night air was crisp with the promise of coming winter, stars spread across the sky in dazzling patterns different from those visible in Bellwood. From his pocket, he withdrew a small device that resembled a metallic cube. Azmuth had given it to him after the hybrid invasion, with strict instructions to use it only in dire emergencies. I'd say magical terrorists with alien tech qualifies, Ben muttered, activating the cube. It unfolded into a complex array of components that floated in midair, glowing with soft blue light. A beam shot upward, presumably sending some kind of faster-than-light signal across the galaxy to Galvan Prime. Minutes passed. Ben paced the tower, wondering if Azmuth would respond. The Galvan creator was notoriously difficult to reach, especially for what he might consider trivial human problems. Just as Ben was about to give up, the array pulsed with new energy, and a hologram flickered into existence. Benjamin Tennyson. Azmuth's diminutive form stood with arms crossed, looking irritated as usual. This had better be important. It is. Ben quickly explained the situation, the Plumber's Bane, the Celestial Codex, the Lodestar Protocol, and the threat to the wizarding world. As he spoke, Azmuth's expression shifted from annoyance to grave concern. I had hoped this particular piece of history would remain buried, he said when Ben finished. So it's true. The Celestials, the Galvan visits, all of it. Azmuth sighed. Yes. The Celestials were a highly advanced species that believed in guiding younger races. They visited Earth approximately 5,000 of your years ago, during what anthropologists call the Bronze Age. And they gave humans magic? No. They discovered that certain humans possessed a genetic quirk that allowed them to manipulate quantum probability fields, what you now call magic. The Celestials merely provided focused tools and training to develop these abilities. What happened to them? The Celestials eventually became involved in a catastrophic war with another advanced species. They abandoned many of their projects, including Earth. Azmuth paced within the hologram. As for my ancestors, yes, a Galvan scientific expedition did visit Earth during your early medieval period. They were particularly interested in the magical humans, as their abilities seemed to defy conventional physics. And they left technology behind. Technology the plumber's bane could use? Possibly. Azmuth frowned. The expedition was lost, their ship crashed somewhere in northern Europe. It was presumed destroyed with all hands. If some of their technology survived, it could be combined with celestial knowledge to create this Lodestar protocol, Ben concluded. This is grave news indeed. Azmuth's hologram flickered slightly. The Lodestar protocol was designed as a safeguard, but in the wrong hands, it could be catastrophic. It wouldn't just suppress magical abilities, it would redirect the underlying quantum energy. Weaponize it. And they need the Omnitrix to make it work. The Omnitrix contains technology that could, theoretically, be modified to interface with celestial systems. Azmuth's voice was grim. Its DNA transmission capabilities could be repurposed to affect the magical gene expressions of every wizard on Earth simultaneously. So what do I do? How do I stop them? First, you must locate the Celestial Codex. It would likely take the form of a crystalline matrix, similar in appearance to a geode but with internal light patterns. And the Galvan technology? Look for devices with our characteristic green energy signature. They would have survived the centuries due to our self-repairing nanotechnology. Ben nodded. Anything else I should know? Azmuth was silent for a moment. Benjamin, I must warn you. The Omnitrix may be responding to your magical environment in ways I didn't anticipate. I've noticed. Some of my aliens have been developing new abilities when they interact with magic. This could be dangerous. Azmuth's hologram leaned closer. The Omnitrix was designed to adapt to your needs, but magic operates outside normal physical parameters. The interactions could become unpredictable. More unpredictable than usual, you mean, Ben said wryly. This is no joking matter. Azmuth's tone was severe. If the magical energy begins to corrupt the Omnitrix's core functions, it could malfunction catastrophically. Be vigilant for any unusual behavior from the device. I will. And Azmuth, thanks for the information. The Galvan creator nodded. Contact me again if you locate either the Codex or the Galvan technology. I may be able to provide further guidance. He paused, then added, and Benjamin. Be careful. The Celestials were not to be trifled with, even at the height of Galvan science. Their technology, even diluted by time, could be extraordinarily dangerous. The hologram flickered out, and the communication device folded back into its cube form. Ben pocketed it, mind racing with the implications of everything he'd learned. He turned to head back to the castle, then froze. Standing in the doorway to the tower was Professor Nyx, her silhouette backlit by the torches of the stairwell. An interesting conversation, Mr. Tennyson. Her voice was soft, dangerous. I suspected you knew more than you were sharing, but this exceeds my expectations. Ben's hand moved subtly toward the Omnitrix. How long were you standing there? Long enough. She stepped onto the tower, her violet eyes reflecting the starlight unnaturally. The Celestials, the Galvan, the Lodestar Protocol, you've been quite thorough in your investigations. And you're very interested in those investigations. Ben didn't back away, though every instinct told him to create distance. Why is that, Professor? Knowledge is power, Mr. Tennyson. Especially knowledge that has been deliberately hidden from our world. Her wand appeared in her hand, though he hadn't seen her draw it. The question is, what do you intend to do with this knowledge? Stop the plumber's bane from using it to hurt people. That's what I do, stop the bad guys. Such a simplistic worldview. She smiled thinly. Good, evil. Heroes, villains. The world is rarely so black and white. Is that why you're up here, spying on me? Moral ambiguity. I'm here because you represent something unprecedented, a bridge between worlds that have been separate for too long. She circled him slowly, like a predator. Magic. Technology. Each powerful on its own, but together, revolutionary. Ben tensed as she moved behind him. You still haven't answered my question. Whose side are you on, Professor? The side of progress, Mr. Tennyson. She stopped, her wand now pointed casually in his direction. The wizarding world has stagnated, clinging to traditions while muggles race ahead with their technology. We face extinction through irrelevance unless we evolve. And the plumber's bane? Are they your idea of evolution? They are, one approach. Flawed, but ambitious. Her voice hardened. What they fail to understand is that true power comes not from controlling magic, but from transcending its limitations. From combining the best of all worlds. Like I do with the Omnitrix, Ben said quietly, pieces falling into place. Precisely. You transform physically, becoming something greater than human. Imagine that principle applied to magic itself, spells that adapt, that evolve beyond their original purpose. Sounds dangerous. All advancement carries risk. She lowered her wand slightly. I'm not your enemy, Ben. In fact, I believe we could be valuable allies. Sorry, but I'm not interested in allying with someone who won't even tell me what they really want. Her eyes flashed. Very well. Directness, then. I want access to the Celestial Codex before the plumber's bane can use it. I want to study the interaction between your Omnitrix and our magic. And I want to ensure that whatever power is unleashed on the solstice is not wasted on the petty ambitions of blood purists. And what would you use it for instead? To create a new kind of magic. A new kind of wizard. She stepped closer. Imagine spells that transform the caster as your Omnitrix transforms you. Imagine magical evolution, guided by wisdom rather than random chance. The intensity in her voice was unsettling. Ben had heard similar speeches before, from Vilgax, from McGregor, from Diagon. Different words, same megalomaniacal core. I think I'll pass. Ben's hand moved to the Omnitrix. Whatever you're planning, it sounds like the kind of thing I usually end up stopping. Nyx sighed, seemingly genuinely disappointed. I had hoped for your willing cooperation. Your unique perspective would be invaluable. And if I'm not willing? Then I'll have to pursue my research without you. She raised her wand again. Obliviate. Ben slapped the Omnitrix dial just as the memory charm shot toward him. In a flash of green light, Chromastone appeared, absorbing the spell's energy. Nice try, he said, his crystalline body glowing with the absorbed magic. But I'm getting pretty good at handling spells. Nyx didn't look surprised, in fact, she smiled. Fascinating. Your transformation appears to have natural resistance to mind-affecting magic. I wonder. She cast again, this time a spell Ben didn't recognize. Purple energy wrapped around Chromastone, not attacking but analyzing, probing. Stop that. He fired a beam of energy at her, which she deflected with a casual wave of her wand. Your crystalline form absorbs magical energy and converts it to another form, she observed clinically. But the process isn't perfect. There's magical residue in your matrix. She was right. Chromastone felt strange, as if the magic she'd cast was somehow clinging to his structure. Before he could respond, Nyx cast a third spell, this one striking the Omnitrix symbol on his chest. Pain lanced through him as the Omnitrix sparked with erratic energy. Against his will, Ben felt himself beginning to transform, cycling rapidly between aliens. Heat Blast, XLR-8, 4 arms, each form holding for just seconds before changing again. Stop, he managed to gasp between transformations. Remarkable, Nyx breathed, watching the process with scientific detachment. The magical interference is causing a cascade failure in the transformation sequencing. Finally, the cycling stopped, leaving Ben as feedback, the conductoid whose energy-absorbing abilities might have been the Omnitrix's automatic response to the magical attack. "What did you do to me?" he demanded, electrical energy crackling between his antennae. "A simple diagnostic spell, modified to interface with non-biological energy systems." Nyx studied him with clinical interest. "Your Omnitrix attempted to compensate, but the magical signature confused its programming." Feedback extended his antenna-like appendages, absorbing the ambient magical energy around them. "Whatever you're trying to do, it won't work. On the contrary, it already has." She smiled coldly. "I now have a much better understanding of how your device interacts with magic. Valuable data for my research." "You're working with the plumber's bane," Ben realized. "You want the codex for yourself. The plumber's bane are merely convenient allies with resources I lack. Their goals are short-sighted, controlling magic rather than evolving it." Nyx's violet eyes gleamed. "My ambitions extend much further." Feedback gathered the energy he'd absorbed, ready to attack, but Nyx was faster. "Tempus fugit," she whispered, and the world around Ben seemed to slow dramatically. He fired his energy blast, but it moved at a fraction of its normal speed. Nyx casually stepped aside. "Time manipulation," she explained, her movements normal while everything else crawled. "Another area where magic surpasses even your alien technology." She approached, studying the slowed energy beam with interest. "I won't obliviate you, Ben. That would be wasteful. Instead, I'll leave you with a choice: join my research voluntarily, or stay out of my way. Interfere, and I'll be forced to take more drastic measures." The time-slowing spell began to fade, the world gradually returning to normal speed. Nyx headed for the door. "We'll speak again soon. In the meantime, I suggest you consider my offer carefully." She paused at the threshold. "Oh, and do be careful with your transformations for the next few days. My diagnostic spell may have caused some instability in the Omnitrix's function." After she left, Feedback slumped against the tower wall, feeling drained. The Omnitrix symbol on his chest flickered erratically before timing out, reverting him to human form. Ben looked down at the Omnitrix with concern. The normally steady green glow pulsed unevenly, and the holographic display flickered when he tried to activate it. "This is bad," he muttered. Without a properly functioning Omnitrix, he'd be at a serious disadvantage against both Nyx and the plumber's bane. He needed help, and not just from Elara or the Hogwarts professors, who might unwittingly report to Nyx. He needed someone who understood both magic and alien technology. It was time to call in reinforcements. The weekend arrived with a flurry of autumn leaves and the first truly cold winds of the season. Ben sat in the library with Elara, surrounded by ancient tomes on Hogwarts history and wizard genealogy, searching for any mention of the Celestials or unusual artifacts from the Founder's era. "Nothing," Elara sighed, closing a particularly dusty volume. "Either this information has been deliberately removed from the historical record, or it was never written down in the first place. Azmuth said the Galvan ship crashed somewhere in northern Europe." Ben rubbed his tired eyes. "Maybe Scotland, near where Hogwarts would eventually be built." "It's possible. Hogwarts is over 1,000 years old, its location could have been chosen because of pre-existing magical properties." She frowned thoughtfully. "The Forbidden Forest has always been strangely magical, even by wizard standards." Ben glanced at the Omnitrix. It had been behaving erratically since Nyx's spell, sometimes working perfectly, other times failing to transform him at all or switching him to the wrong alien. He'd have to be careful about relying on it until he figured out how to undo whatever she'd done. "We need access to the restricted section," he said quietly. "The really old books are kept there. We'd need a professor's permission." Elara bit her lip. Flitwick might give it, but Nyx might find out. Ben finished her thought. We can't risk it. They'd agreed not to share what they knew about Nyx with anyone yet, not without proof. A defense against the dark arts professor with mysterious research interests wasn't enough to make accusations, especially when that professor had the ear of the headmistress. There might be another way. Elara leaned closer. The room of requirement can become almost anything the seeker needs. What if we asked it to show us information about the Celestials? Worth a try. Ben checked his watch. But it'll have to wait. I'm meeting some people at the Hogsmeade station in 20 minutes. People? What people? Ben grinned. Back up. An hour later, Ben stood on the platform at Hogsmeade station as the Hogwarts Express pulled in, its scarlet engine gleaming in the afternoon sun. This wasn't a regular school train, it had been specially arranged for his visitors. The doors opened, and 3 familiar figures stepped out. Ben. Gwen rushed forward, pulling him into a tight hug. Her red hair was longer than when he'd last seen her, and she wore robes similar to wizard fashion, though with her own magical symbol embroidered on the sleeves. About time you got in real trouble, Kevin said with a grin, clasping Ben's hand. He looked much the same, black t-shirt, jeans, permanent bad boy smirk, though Ben noticed new tech integrated into his watch and boots. The third figure approached more sedately. Tennyson. Grandpa Max. Ben hugged his grandfather, who was dressed in his plumber uniform rather than his usual Hawaiian shirt. I didn't know you were coming too. When my grandson tells me there's a group called the Plumber's Bane running around with alien tech, it gets my attention. Max's weathered face was serious beneath its smile. Elara stood slightly apart, looking uncertain until Ben waved her over. Guys, this is Elara Winters. She's been helping me navigate the wizard world. Nice to finally meet you, Gwen said warmly. Ben's mentioned you in his letters. Kevin raised an eyebrow at Ben, who felt his cheeks grow warm. Let's head to the 3 broomsticks, he said quickly. We can talk there. Once settled at a corner table with privacy charms in place, courtesy of Gwen, Ben filled them in on everything, the Celestial Codex, the Galvan ship, Professor Nyx's strange behavior, and the Omnitrix's increasingly erratic function. Show me the Omnitrix, Kevin said when he finished. Having absorbed Galvan technology in the past, Kevin had developed a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of the device. Ben held out his wrist. Kevin examined it carefully, occasionally touching the casing with a finger transformed to match various scanning materials. There's definitely magical interference in the transformation matrix, he concluded. It's like the spell created a feedback loop in the DNA sequencer. Can you fix it? Ben asked anxiously. Maybe, with the right tools. Kevin glanced at Gwen. Some of those spells you learned in Legerdemain might help too. Gwen nodded. I can try to create a magical barrier that blocks further interference while allowing the Omnitrix's normal functions to operate. And this Professor Nyx, Max said, his expression grim. You believe she's working with the Plumber's Bane, but with her own agenda? That's my guess. She knows too much about alien technology, and she's way too interested in the Omnitrix. Could she be a plumber gone rogue? Elara suggested. That would explain her knowledge. Max shook his head. We have no record of any wizard operatives in this region. But I'll check the archives for any mention of someone matching her description. What about this Celestial Codex? Gwen asked. Any leads on where it might be? We think it's somewhere in or near Hogwarts, Ben replied. The Forbidden Forest is our best guess, it's where magical energy is strongest, and it's the location Callum mentioned for their winter solstice ritual. And you trust this Callum kid? Kevin looked skeptical. Even though his father's with the bad guys? Not completely, Ben admitted. But his information has checked out so far. We should search the forest, Gwen decided. My magic might be able to sense celestial energy, especially if it's related to the anodite power source. The forest is huge, Elara warned. And dangerous, there are centaurs, acromantulas, and who knows what else. Nothing we haven't handled before, Kevin said confidently. Max pulled out a plumber badge. I've brought some equipment that might help. Alien tech detectors, communications devices, defensive weapons. How did you get those past the magical barriers? Ilara asked, impressed. Plumber tech is designed to work in multiple environments, Max explained. And Gwen added some magical modifications to ensure functionality. They spent the next hour planning their forest expedition, deciding to go that night when they'd be less likely to be observed. Hogwarts security was tight, but with Ben's knowledge of the grounds and Gwen's magical abilities, they were confident they could slip out undetected. As they wrapped up their meeting, a commotion outside drew their attention. Shouts and the sound of running feet carried through the windows. What's going on? Ben moved to look outside. The main street of Hogsmeade was in chaos. Villagers were running for cover as half a dozen figures in familiar silver masks and black robes appeared in the center of town, wands raised. The plumber's bane, Ben growled. They're attacking the village. Again. Ilara looked alarmed. But why? There's nothing here worth, she stopped mid-sentence, eyes widening in realization. Unless they're not after something in the village. They're after someone. Everyone looked at Ben, who was already activating the Omnitrix. Only one way to find out. The dial spun erratically, a symptom of Nyx's interference, before settling on an unfamiliar silhouette. Ben slapped it down anyway, hoping for something useful. The green light faded to reveal a new transformation, a sleek, humanoid alien with blue-black skin that seemed to absorb the light around it. Markings like constellations glowed faintly across its body, and its eyes shone with the same light as distant stars. Whoa, Ben looked down at himself in surprise. New alien? That's not one of the original set, Gwen said, staring. The Omnitrix must have unlocked it because of the magical environment. I'll call him Celestial. Ben declared, feeling power thrumming through his new form. It felt different from his other aliens, more connected to the world around him, as if he could sense the flow of energy through the air. Ben, wait. Max called, but Ben was already moving, rushing outside to confront the attackers. In the street, the plumber's bane members were casting destructive spells at storefronts and sending villagers fleeing in terror. Their leader, a tall figure with a more elaborate mask than the others, spotted Ben immediately. There he is. The alien shapeshifter, he shouted, pointing his wand. Capture him alive. Spells flew toward Ben, but instinctively, his new form raised a hand. The magical energy bent around him, diverted into the constellation patterns on his skin, which glowed brighter. Cool, Ben, now Celestial, grinned. He extended his other hand, and the absorbed magic shot back at the attackers, now tinged with starlight. Two of the masked figures were thrown backward by the redirected energy. The others spread out, trying to flank him. Gwen emerged from the pub, her hands glowing with magenta energy. Ben. Your new form, it's channeling mana directly. And it feels awesome. Celestial moved with incredible grace, seeming almost to flow between the spells being cast at him. Each near miss caused the constellation patterns on his body to brighten. Kevin, having absorbed the stone from a nearby wall, charged into the fray, his rock-hard fists making short work of one attacker. Max followed with a plumber energy pistol, firing stun blasts that dropped another. The remaining attackers regrouped around their leader, who raised his wand high. Enough games. Fiend fire. A massive serpent of magical fire erupted from his wand, growing and twisting as it lunged toward Ben. Even Celestial seemed taken aback by the sheer destructive power of the spell. Ben, get back. Gwen shouted, throwing up a mana shield. But Celestial stood his ground, the constellation patterns on his body pulsing rapidly. As the fiery serpent struck, his form seemed to ripple, and suddenly the fire was flowing into him, the patterns on his skin now burning with contained flame. This is definitely new, he gasped, his voice strained with the effort of containing so much magical energy. The plumber's Bane leader staggered back. Impossible. No being can absorb fiendfire. Celestial struggled to control the immense power he'd absorbed. Can't hold it much longer, he warned, the fire beginning to leak from the patterns on his skin. Channel it upward. Gwen called. Away from the buildings. With a tremendous effort, Celestial directed his hand skyward and released the contained fiendfire. It shot into the air like a volcanic eruption, dispersing harmlessly in the upper atmosphere. The effort left him drained. Celestial dropped to one knee, the glow of his constellation patterns dimming. The plumber's Bane leader saw his opportunity. Now. The containment spell. Before anyone could react, all three remaining attackers cast simultaneously, creating a triangular prison of energy around Celestial. The magical barrier contracted rapidly, touching the Omnitrix symbol on his chest. With a cry of pain, Celestial reverted to human form, the Omnitrix sparking wildly. The containment spell shimmered around Ben, preventing him from moving or touching the Omnitrix. Ben. Gwen tried to break through the barrier with her mana, but her energy simply flowed around it without penetrating. Antianodite wards, the leader said, sounding smug. We came prepared for your cousin, Tennyson. Max fired his plumber weapon at the barrier, but the energy bolts were similarly absorbed. Kevin, still in his stone form, attempted to physically break through, only to be repelled with an electric shock that cracked his rocky exterior. The boy and his device are coming with us, the leader announced. Our work requires both. I don't think so, came a new voice from behind them. Professor Longbottom stood at the end of the street, wand raised. Beside him was Callum Blackthorn, looking pale but determined. The leader turned, his posture registering shock even beneath his robes. Callum. What are you? Hello, father, Callum said coldly. I believe this charade has gone on long enough. Traitor, the man hissed. After everything I've taught you about our heritage, our duty, your duty, not mine. Callum's wand was steady despite the tremor in his voice. I won't let you destroy our world in some misguided attempt to purify it. Longbottom stepped forward. Release Mr. Tennyson immediately, or face the consequences. The leader laughed harshly. You and what army, Longbottom? As if on cue, the air filled with popping sounds as a dozen Aurus apparat into the street, their wands trained on the plumber's Bane members. This one, Longbottom replied calmly. Chaos erupted as spells flew in all directions. In the confusion, Elara slipped behind the attackers, her wand moving in a complex pattern as she worked on dismantling the containment spell around Ben. Almost got it, she muttered, sweat beading on her forehead from the magical exertion. With a final flick, the barrier shattered. Ben stumbled forward, free but disoriented. The Omnitrix, he gasped, looking down at the device. It was cycling through alien silhouettes randomly, the dial spinning without his input. It's malfunctioning worse than before. We need to get you out of here, Elara urged, helping him to his feet. Not without stopping them first. Ben reached for the Omnitrix despite its erratic behavior. Ben, don't. Gwen called, seeing what he was about to do. But it was too late. Ben slammed the dial down, and green light engulfed him. When it faded, he had transformed into Heat Blast, but something was wrong. The magma that comprised his body was tinged with blue magical energy, and sparks of various colors shot from his flame-covered head. This doesn't feel right, Heat Blast said, his voice distorted with magical interference. Before he could do anything else, the Omnitrix symbol on his chest began to pulse rapidly, and without warning, he transformed again, this time into Wildmutt, then rapidly into Diamondhead, 4 arms, and a blur of other forms, each lasting only seconds. What's happening to him? Elara cried. The containment spell interacted with Nyx's magical interference, Gwen realized. It's caused a complete transformation cascade failure. The rapid shifting continued, each form appearing more unstable than the last, some with features blended from multiple aliens. Around Ben, magical energy began to build, crackling in the air like static electricity. "Everyone back," Max ordered. "The Omnitrix is going critical." The Aurors and Plumbers Bane members alike retreated from the growing maelstrom of energy surrounding Ben. Only the leader remained, staring transfixed at the spectacular failure of alien technology. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he whispered. "The Omnitrix was meant to be our key to controlling magic, not this." With a final violent surge of energy, Ben transformed into feedback, but a version twisted by magical interference, with crackling runes inscribed across his black and white body. "Too much power." Feedback gasped, electricity and magic arcing from his antennae. "Can't contain it." "Ben, listen to me." Gwen approached as close as she dared. "You need to ground the energy. Channel it into the earth." Feedback nodded painfully, dropping to his knees and plunging his hands into the cobblestone street. Energy poured from him into the ground, causing the stones to glow briefly before the power dissipated. Gradually, the wild energy subsided. Feedback slumped forward, exhausted, as the Omnitrix timed out and returned him to human form. In the sudden quiet, the Aurors moved in, apprehending the remaining Plumbers Bane members. Their leader put up a brief struggle before being subdued by two Aurors working in tandem. As they removed his mask, Callum stepped forward, his face a mix of anger and sorrow. The man glaring back at him had the same gray eyes and pointed features, though lined with age and hardened by fanaticism. "I did this for you, Callum," the man said bitterly. "For your future. For all wizard kind." "You did it for yourself, father," Callum replied quietly. "Your fear of change, your obsession with purity, it was never about protecting our world." As the Aurors led the elder Blackthorn away, Callum turned to Ben, who was being helped to his feet by Gwen and Kevin. "I'm sorry," Callum said. "I should have warned you sooner. When I heard they were planning another attack, I went straight to Professor Longbottom." "You did the right thing," Ben assured him, though his voice was weak from the ordeal. "Your father made his choice. You didn't have to follow him." Callum nodded, something like respect flickering in his eyes. "Perhaps you're not so bad, Tennyson. For an American with alien technology. And maybe you're not such a prat. For a pure-blood Slytherin." A ghost of a smile crossed Callum's face before he turned to join Professor Longbottom, who was speaking with the Auror captain. Gwen examined the Omnitrix with concern. "It's stabilizing, but the damage is significant. We need to perform a full diagnostic and reset." "Can you fix it?" Ben asked anxiously. "With Kevin's help, probably. But it'll take time, and we'll need a safe place to work, somewhere away from magical interference." "The Shrieking Shack," Elara suggested. "It's isolated, and the magical aura there is weaker than in the castle or village." Max nodded. "Good thinking. We should move quickly, before someone else takes an interest in the situation," a smooth voice interrupted. They turned to find Professor Nyx standing nearby, her violet eyes taking in the scene with calculated interest. "Quite a display, Mr. Tennyson," she said, her gaze lingering on the Omnitrix. "Your device appears to be having difficulties." Ben tensed. "No thanks to you. I see you've brought reinforcements." Nyx's eyes flicked to Gwen, Kevin, and Max. "How resourceful. But unnecessary. I could have protected you from this crude attempt at capture." "Is that why you were nowhere to be seen during the attack?" Elara asked pointedly. Nyx smiled thinly. "I have my own methods, Ms. Winters. Not all of us need to make a spectacle of our interventions." Max stepped forward. "Professor Nyx. I'm Max Tennyson, Ben's grandfather and a plumber magister." "Ah, the famous Magister Tennyson." Nyx inclined her head slightly. "Your reputation precedes you." "As does yours, apparently," Max replied evenly. "I've been making inquiries. There's no record of a Professor Nyx in any magical education registry in Europe. For the briefest moment, something dangerous flickered in Nyx's eyes before her composed mask returned. Administrative oversight, I'm sure. The wizarding world is notoriously disorganized with its record-keeping. Or perhaps you're not who you claim to be. Max's hand moved subtly toward his concealed plumber badge. Careful, Magister. Nyx's voice dropped lower. You're a guest in our world. Accusations against a Hogwarts professor require substantial evidence. The plumber's bane is in custody, Ben said. Whatever you're planning with the Celestial Codex, you've lost your allies. Have I? Nyx smiled enigmatically. Mr. Blackthorne and his associates were merely one faction of a larger movement. Convenient tools, but ultimately dispensable. She turned as if to leave, then paused. I would focus on repairing your Omnitrix, Ben. The winter solstice approaches, and you'll want to be at full strength for what comes next. Before anyone could question her further, she disappeared with a crack of apparition. I really don't like her, Kevin muttered. She's definitely hiding something, Gwen agreed. And she knows too much about the Omnitrix and celestial technology. One problem at a time, Max said firmly. First, we repair the Omnitrix. Then we find the Codex before she does. As they headed toward the Shrieking Shack, Ben couldn't shake the feeling that they'd only scratched the surface of whatever Professor Nyx was planning. The captured plumber's Bane members might provide some answers, but the real threat remained at large, and possibly closer than ever. The Shrieking Shack lived up to its reputation as the most haunted building in Britain, though not due to actual ghosts. Wind whistled through broken boards, and the dilapidated structure creaked and groaned with every movement. Charming place, Kevin commented dryly as they set up equipment in what had once been a living room. Couldn't we find somewhere with fewer tetanus risks? It's perfect, Gwen replied, creating magical lights that floated around the room. The magical signature here is unique, disruptive to most spells but somehow stabilizing for cross-dimensional energy work. Ben sat in a dusty armchair, the Omnitrix extended toward Kevin, who had transformed his hand into a complex tool resembling a Galvan diagnostic scanner. Hold still, Kevin instructed. I need to isolate the magical interference pattern. Max and Alara had established a perimeter around the shack, placing plumber tech sensors that would alert them to anyone approaching. They returned as Kevin finished his initial scan. The magical barrier is in place, Alara reported. Anyone coming within 50 meters will trigger an alarm. Good, Max nodded. What's the verdict on the Omnitrix? Kevin frowned at the readings on his transformed hand. It's bad. The magical energy has infiltrated the core transformation matrix. It's not just interfering with the transformations, it's actually rewriting some of the alien DNA. Is that why I got that new alien? Ben asked. Celestial? Partly, Gwen said, examining Kevin's readings. The Omnitrix is designed to evolve and adapt to new threats. The magical environment triggered it to unlock new capabilities, but Nyx's spell accelerated and corrupted the process. Can you fix it? We think so. Kevin's hand morphed into a different tool. We need to purge the magical interference, then reset the transformation matrix. The problem is, we can only do that with the Omnitrix in master control mode. Which I can't access, Ben groaned. Gwen placed her hand over the Omnitrix, her palm glowing with mana. Maybe together we can. My magic is based on the same energy principles as wizard magic, but with more direct control. If I can isolate the interference pattern, Kevin might be able to bypass the corrupted systems. For the next hour, they worked on the Omnitrix, combining Gwen's magical knowledge, Kevin's technical expertise, and Ben's intuitive understanding of how the device functioned. Max and Alara kept watch, occasionally offering suggestions. There! Kevin exclaimed as the Omnitrix suddenly glowed a brighter green. I think we've isolated the corrupted code. Now comes the tricky part, Gwen said, sweat beading on her forehead from the effort. Ben, I need you to visualize the Omnitrix's core, just like when Azmuth helped you access Master Control before. Ben closed his eyes, focusing on the familiar sensation of the Omnitrix's energy. He could almost see it in his mind, a sphere of green light, now shot through with purple tendrils of magical interference. I see it, he murmured. The magic is like vines wrapping around the core. Focus on removing them, Gwen instructed, her own eyes closed as she channeled mana into the device. Visualize them dissolving, breaking apart. Ben concentrated harder, imagining the purple tendrils dissolving under his mental touch. As he worked, he felt Kevin making minute adjustments to the Omnitrix's physical components. Suddenly, the Omnitrix emitted a bright flash of light, temporarily blinding everyone in the room. Warning, unauthorized access detected, the Omnitrix announced in Azmuth's voice. Initiating security protocol. That's not good, Kevin muttered. The Omnitrix began to heat up on Ben's wrist, growing uncomfortably warm. Gwen, what's happening? Ben asked urgently. The security system thinks we're trying to hack it. She placed both hands on the device, channeling more mana. We need to convince it we're authorized users. How do we do that? Your DNA is the key, Max said suddenly. Ben, press your palm against the dial and speak your full name. The Omnitrix is key to your genetic signature and voice pattern. Ben placed his palm flat against the Omnitrix face. Benjamin Kirby Tennyson. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the device cooled, and the dial rotated slowly. Genetic signature confirmed, the Omnitrix announced. Entering recovery mode. A holographic display appeared above the dial, showing complex Galvan script and diagrams of the device's internal systems. It worked! Gwen exclaimed. We're in the diagnostic interface. Kevin studied the hologram intently. This is the same system Azmuth showed me when he was upgrading the Omnitrix. I can work with this. For the next 30 minutes, Kevin manipulated the holographic interface, isolating and removing the magical corruption while Gwen maintained a barrier to prevent new interference. Finally, the display flickered and reformed, showing a clean, stable pattern. Diagnostic complete, the Omnitrix announced. Corruption purged. Recalibration recommended. Do it, Ben said firmly. The Omnitrix detached from his wrist, floating in the air as it began to reconfigure itself. The familiar watch design shifted, becoming sleeker, with subtle changes to the faceplate and band. Recalibration complete, it announced, settling back onto Ben's wrist. New firmware installed. Master Control temporarily enabled for system verification. Ben stared at the device in surprise. Master Control? For how long? Temporary access granted, 24 hours, the Omnitrix replied. Kevin whistled. Lucky break. Azmuth must have programmed it to enable Master Control during major recovery operations. This is perfect, Ben said, already cycling through the holographic alien displays with a thought. With Master Control, I can transform instantly, without timeout limits. We should use this advantage to find the Celestial Codex before it expires. What about that new alien you transformed into? Ilara asked. Celestial? Is it still in the Omnitrix? Ben accessed the mental interface, searching through the available transformations. Yes. It's here, along with a few other new ones I don't recognize. The magical environment must have unlocked DNA sequences that were dormant before, Gwen theorized. Even with the corruption removed, the new transformations remain accessible. Which could be extremely useful against magical opponents, Max noted. Especially if we're going to search the Forbidden Forest tonight. A sudden alarm interrupted their discussion. One of the perimeter sensors had been triggered. Someone's coming, Max warned, drawing his plumber weapon. Through a gap in the boarded windows, they saw a lone figure approaching the shack, tall, broad-shouldered, and distinctly non-human. It's Hagrid, Ilara said with relief. The gamekeeper. Ben opened the door as the massive man reached the porch. Hagrid's wild beard couldn't hide his concerned expression. "There ya are," he exclaimed. "Been lookin' all over fair ya, Ben. McGonagall's called an emergency meeting. The Aurors have been questionin' those Plumbers Bane folk, and they've learned somethin' troublin'. What is it?" Ben asked. "It's Professor Nyx," Hagrid said grimly. "She's not who she claims ter be. And she's gone missin', along with several artifacts from the restricted section o' the library." Ben and the others exchanged alarmed glances. "Did they say who she really is?" Max asked. Hagrid shook his head. "Not ter me. But they need ya back at the castle right away, Ben. All of ya," he added, looking at the others. "McGonagall says your expertise might be needed." As they gathered their equipment, Ben felt a mixture of vindication and dread. They'd been right about Nyx, but now she was in the wind, and likely one step closer to whatever she was planning. With the Omnitrix repaired and Master Control temporarily enabled, they had a small advantage. The question was, would it be enough to stop whatever was coming when the winter solstice arrived? Hogwarts Castle was in a state of controlled chaos when they arrived. Aurors moved purposefully through the corridors, checking various rooms and consulting with professors. Students had been confined to their common rooms, though many watched curiously from windows or stairwells. Headmistress McGonagall met them in the entrance hall, her normally stern face even more severe than usual. "Mr. Tennyson, thank you for returning promptly." She nodded to the others. "And thank you all for coming. I wish it were under better circumstances." "What's happening, Professor?" Ben asked. Hagrid said Nyx is missing. Not just missing. She was never who she claimed to be. McGonagall led them toward her office, speaking in a low voice. "The real Pythia Nyx is currently in a magical hospital in Greece, having been placed under an extremely powerful memory charm 6 months ago." "So who's been teaching at Hogwarts?" Ilara asked. "That's what concerns us most." They reached the stone gargoyle guarding the headmistress's office. "Celestial threshold," McGonagall said, and the gargoyle jumped aside. Ben's head snapped up at the password. "Celestial?" McGonagall gave him a sharp look as they ascended the spiral staircase. "Yes." A coincidence that now seemed significantly less coincidental. The circular office was crowded with people, Professor Longbottom, several Aurors, and to Ben's surprise, Callum Blackthorne, who sat in a corner looking pale and tense. "Ah, they've arrived," said a tall, dark-skinned Auror whom Ben recognized from news reports as Kingsley Shacklebolt, the head of the Auror office. "Good. We have much to discuss." "First," McGonagall said, "I believe some introductions are in order." After quick presentations, Shacklebolt took charge of the briefing. "Our interrogation of the captured Plumbers Bane members has revealed disturbing information," he began. "The woman calling herself Professor Nyx is actually Celine Erebos, a former unspeakable who was dismissed from the Department of Mysteries 5 years ago for unauthorized experimentation with forbidden magical artifacts." "What kind of artifacts?" Gwen asked. "Ones of extraterrestrial origin," Shacklebolt replied gravely. "The department has long studied certain objects believed to have come from beyond our world, objects that predate known wizard history." "The Celestial Codex," Ben said. Shacklebolt looked surprised. "You know of it?" "We've done some research," Ben said carefully, not wanting to reveal Azmuth's involvement. "We know about the Celestials visiting Earth thousands of years ago, and about the Galvan ship that crashed here during the medieval period." "Then you understand the gravity of the situation," Shacklebolt said. "The Department of Mysteries has safeguarded fragments of the Codex for centuries, studying them without fully activating their power. Erebos was obsessed with unlocking their full potential, believing they contained secrets that could evolve wizard magic beyond its current limitations. She said something similar to me," Ben recalled. "About creating a new kind of magic, a new kind of wizard." Callum spoke up from his corner. My father said she approached the plumber's bane about a year ago. She offered them access to powerful magic in exchange for their assistance locating certain artifacts and securing alien technology. Specifically, the Omnitrix, Ben guessed. Callum nodded. They were supposed to capture you during the Hogsmeade attack, but you proved more formidable than expected. What I don't understand, McGonagall interjected, is how she managed to infiltrate Hogwarts so thoroughly. Our vetting process for professors is quite rigorous, especially after previous incidents. Shacklebolt cleared his throat. That would be due to her particular talents. Erebos was an accomplished legilimens and metamorphmagus, able to read minds and alter her appearance at will. Combined with her knowledge of memory charms, she could convince almost anyone of almost anything. So what's she after now? Kevin asked. And where is she? Based on what we've learned, she's seeking the primary codex fragment, which was hidden somewhere in this region centuries ago, Shacklebolt explained. Legend says Rowena Ravenclaw herself concealed it. In the Forbidden Forest, Elara said quietly. That's why the magic there is so strange, it's being affected by the celestial artifact. Precisely, Ms. Winters. McGonagall looked impressed. The forest has always had unusual magical properties, even by Hogwarts standards. And the winter solstice is when the forest's magic is strongest, Professor Longbottom added. It's when the boundaries between magical dimensions are thinnest. Ben stood up, decision made. Then we need to find the codex before she does. And I think I know how. He activated the Omnitrix, scrolling through the alien silhouettes with newfound ease thanks to master control. Finding the one he wanted, he transformed without touching the dial. In a flash of green light, the new alien appeared, the starry-skinned being he'd named Celestial. The classroom grew darker as his constellation-patterned body seemed to absorb ambient light. This transformation appeared when I was fighting the plumber's bane, Ben explained, his voice now carrying an echo like distant wind. I think it's connected to the Celestials themselves, maybe the Omnitrix sampled DNA from energy residue in the magical environment. Gwen approached, studying him with fascination. The energy signature is similar to anodite mana, but older, more primal. Can you sense the codex? Max asked. Celestial closed his star-like eyes, concentrating. I think so. There's a pulse of energy coming from deep in the forest. It feels familiar, like it's calling to this form. Then that's where we need to go, Shacklebolt decided. I'll assemble an Auror team too. No, Celestial interrupted. Too many people will alert Erebos. We need a small team that can move quickly and quietly. He's right, Max agreed. Ben, Gwen, Kevin, and myself should go. We have experience working together in situations like this. I'm coming too, Elara said firmly. I know the forest better than any of you. As do I, Longbottom added. And as deputy headmaster, I have a responsibility to protect Hogwarts from threats like this. I should join as well, Callum said, standing up. My father told me things about the codex that might be useful. McGonagall looked like she wanted to object but finally nodded. Very well. But you will maintain constant communication with the castle. At the first sign of serious danger, you will call for reinforcements. We should move quickly, Celestial urged. The energy signature is fluctuating, I think Erebos might already be attempting to access the codex. As they prepared to leave, gathering supplies and communication devices, Shacklebolt pulled Max aside. Magister Tennyson, he said quietly, there's something else you should know about Celine Erebos. What is it? During her time as an unspeakable, she led a research project on hybridizing magical and non-magical technologies. The project was terminated when several test subjects changed in unexpected ways. Changed how? Shacklebolt's expression was grim. They began exhibiting abilities similar to what you might call aliens. Transformative powers, energy manipulation, physiological alterations. None survived the process. Max's eyes widened. You're saying she was trying to create human-alien hybrids using magic? Worse than that. She believed she could use celestial technology to transform wizards into a superior species that combined the best aspects of magical humans and advanced alien races. Shacklebolt glanced at Ben, who was consulting with the others. Your grandson's Omnitrix represents exactly what she's been trying to achieve, controlled transformation into different beings with different powers. No wonder she was so interested in him, Max muttered. Be careful out there, Shacklebolt warned. Erebos isn't just knowledgeable, she's brilliant, ruthless, and utterly convinced of her own righteousness. And after 5 years in hiding, there's no telling what else she's become. The Forbidden Forest lived up to its name. Even in the early evening, before true nightfall, its interior was shadowed and foreboding. Ancient trees grew so densely that their branches interlocked overhead, creating a canopy that blocked most of the fading daylight. Their group moved in formation, Celestial in the lead, using his connection to the Codex's energy to navigate, with Gwen beside him, her hands glowing with mana for both light and protection. Kevin, having absorbed the metal from a suit of armor, formed the rear guard with Max, both armed with modified plumber weapons. Between them walked Alara, Longbottom, and Callum, wands at the ready. The signal's getting stronger, Celestial said after they'd been walking for nearly an hour. We're getting close. So are other things, Alara whispered, pointing to large spider webs glistening between trees ahead. Acromantula territory. We should go around. They altered course, moving east along a barely visible trail. The forest grew stranger the deeper they went, plants glowed with bioluminescence, mushrooms pulsed with weird rhythms, and occasionally they glimpsed creatures unlike any known magical species. The celestial artifact is changing the forest, Longbottom observed, examining a flower that seemed to shift colors as they watched. Accelerating magical evolution. Just like Erebos wants to do with wizards, Callum said grimly. Suddenly, Celestial stopped, holding up a hand for silence. We're here. They had reached a clearing, or rather, what had once been a clearing. Now it was occupied by what appeared to be a massive, gnarled tree with a trunk at least 30 feet in diameter. But as they drew closer, they realized it wasn't a tree at all. It's a ship, Kevin breathed, reaching out to touch the surface. Organic technology, like the hybrid used. The Galvan research vessel, Max recognized. It crashed here and over the centuries, it merged with the forest. The trunk was indeed the main body of a spacecraft, now overgrown with vegetation and partially buried in the earth. What they had taken for branches were actually sensor arrays and communication equipment, twisted and elongated by centuries of magical exposure. Celestial approached the ship, the constellation patterns on his skin pulsing in sync with faint lights visible beneath the organic surface. The Codex is inside, he said with certainty. And it's active. Gwen created a mana field around the group. I sense another presence. Recent magic has been used here, powerful, dark magic. Erebos, Longbottom said quietly. She's already found it. As if summoned by the name, a smooth voice spoke from the shadows. Indeed I have, Professor. Though I prefer Celine now. Nyx was merely a convenient alias. She stepped into view from behind the ship tree, and Ben was momentarily shocked by her changed appearance. Gone was the severe bob and conservative robes of Professor Nyx. This woman had long, dark hair that seemed to float around her like it was underwater, and her eyes glowed the same violet as before but with an intensity that was almost painful to look at. Her robes were now midnight blue, covered in shifting silver symbols similar to the constellations on Celestial's skin. I was wondering when you'd join me, she said, smiling without warmth. I left enough clues for even Hogwarts security to eventually work out my little masquerade. Whatever you're planning, it ends now, Celestial declared, moving into a fighting stance. Erebos laughed. Oh, Ben. Always the hero, rushing in without understanding. I'm not your enemy. I'm the future, the bridge between worlds that you yourself represent. You experimented on people, Max said coldly. Tried to force transformations they weren't ready for. Necessary sacrifices for progress, she dismissed. Evolution is rarely painless. What have you done with the Codex? Longbottom demanded, his wand pointed steadily at her. Nothing yet. The final activation requires the winter solstice. Her gaze shifted to Celestial. But how fascinating that you've manifested this particular form. A celestial hybrid, exactly the kind of evolutionary leap I've been working toward. It's just another alien transformation, Celestial insisted, though uncertainty crept into his voice. Is it? She gestured, and the ship tree pulsed with light. A section of the organic hull parted like curtains, revealing an entrance. Why don't we find out? The Codex awaits. Kevin stepped forward, his metal arms forming into blades. Lady, you're crazy if you think we're just going to follow you in there. You misunderstand. I'm not asking. Erebos raised her hands, and the ground beneath them trembled. I've spent months preparing this site. The entire clearing is now an extension of my will. Vines erupted from the earth, wrapping around Kevin and Max before they could react. Gwen's mana shield protected her momentarily, but the plants secreted some kind of dampening agent that weakened her energy field until it collapsed. Longbottom managed to cast a fire spell that incinerated the vines near him, creating a momentary safe zone for himself, Elara, and Callum. Celestial leaped into the air, avoiding the initial wave of vegetation, and launched himself at Erebos. But just before he reached her, the Omnitrix symbol on his chest flickered, and he involuntarily reverted to human form. What? Ben stumbled, his momentum carrying him forward before he could stop. No. Erebos caught him by the throat, lifting him effortlessly. Did you really think I wouldn't plan for your interference? The ship's energy field disrupts transformation technology, including your precious Omnitrix. She tossed him aside like a rag doll. Ben rolled to his feet, reaching for the Omnitrix, but the dial remained unresponsive. Master control, disabled, he gasped. Temporarily, Erebos confirmed. Long enough for our purposes. With a wave of her hand, the remaining vines subdued everyone except Longbottom, who continued to fight with impressive magical skill, casting spells rapidly to keep the animated plants at bay. Neville Longbottom, Erebos said, sounding almost respectful. The boy everyone underestimated who became a war hero and master herbologist. Your resistance to my botanical control is impressive. 5 years as an auror before teaching didn't hurt either, Longbottom replied, casting another fire spell to clear more vines. Indeed. But ultimately futile. Erebos made a twisting gesture with her fingers, and the earth itself rose up, encasing Longbottom's legs in rapidly hardening soil. The forest responds to the Codex, and the Codex responds to me. With everyone immobilized, Erebos returned her attention to Ben, who was still struggling with the unresponsive Omnitrix. Now, shall we proceed? The Codex awaits, and you, Ben Tennyson, will play a crucial role in what comes next. I'm not helping you with anything, Ben spat. Your cooperation is optional. Your Omnitrix, however, is essential. She gestured, and the vines holding Ben dragged him toward the ship entrance. The rest of you will join us shortly. I want witnesses for what's about to occur. As Ben was pulled into the ship, his friends struggled against their restraints. Gwen managed to create a small mana blade, slowly cutting through the magically enhanced plants holding her. We need to get free before she does whatever she's planning, she whispered to Kevin, who was nearest to her. Working on it, he grunted, the metal coating his body slowly sharpening to cut through the vines. Inside the ship, Ben was amazed by what he saw. Despite centuries of integration with the forest, the vessel's interior was largely intact, a blend of organic technology and living plants that had adapted to each other. Lights pulsed along what might have been control panels, and strange fruits grew from what appeared to be data terminals. At the center of the main chamber was a crystalline structure about the size of a refrigerator, a geode-like formation that glowed with internal light, patterns shifting within its translucent surface. "The Celestial Codex," Erebos said reverently, releasing Ben from the vines but keeping her wand trained on him. "Or at least, the primary fragment. The accumulated knowledge of a species so advanced they could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself." "What do you want from me?" Ben demanded, still trying to activate the Omnitrix without success. "Your device contains the most comprehensive collection of alien genetic material in the galaxy. Combined with the Codex's ability to manipulate magical genetics, it creates possibilities that neither technology alone could achieve." Her eyes gleamed with fanaticism. "Imagine wizards who could transform at will, like you do. Imagine magical beings who could adapt to any threat, any environment. You want to use the Omnitrix to transform wizards into aliens? It doesn't work that way. Not directly, no. But the Omnitrix's transmission capabilities, its ability to broadcast genetic information across space, that can be repurposed." Erebos approached the Codex, placing her hand on its surface. The crystal responded, internal lights pulsing in rhythm with her touch. "The Celestials designed the Codex to modify human genetics on a global scale," she continued. "Originally to enhance magical potential, but with the right modifications, it could do so much more." Outside, the others were dragged into the ship by Erebos's plant constructs, still struggling against their bonds. "Ben!" Gwen called, seeing her cousin standing near the crystal formation. "I'm okay," he assured her, though his eyes never left the Omnitrix, which was still unresponsive. "Just having some technical difficulties. The Omnitrix will remain inactive until I allow otherwise," Erebos informed them. "The ship's dampening field is specifically calibrated to disrupt transformation technology without affecting its core systems, which I need intact." "Whatever you're planning won't work," Max said, his voice calm despite the situation. "The Omnitrix has safeguards against unauthorized use." "Safeguards that can be bypassed with celestial technology," Erebos countered. She gestured to a panel near the Codex, where she had installed what appeared to be a modified wand combined with alien components. "This interface will allow me to access the Omnitrix's transmission functions without triggering its security protocols." Kevin had managed to partially free one arm, the metal covering it now formed into a thin blade. He caught Gwen's eye, signaling his progress with a slight nod. "Even if you manage to connect the Omnitrix to the Codex," Elara spoke up, distracting Erebos, "you'd need enormous magical power to activate a global transformation effect." "Very good, Ms. Winters." Erebos smiled approvingly. "Which is precisely why we're here, in this location, at this time of year. The winter solstice creates a magical confluence that amplifies power exponentially, especially in places where the boundary between dimensions is already thin, like this forest." "You're insane," Callum said flatly. "My father and his associates wanted to protect wizard kind from alien influence. What you're proposing would transform us into something unrecognizable." "Your father was a short-sighted fool who couldn't see past his own prejudices," Erebos snapped. "I offered the Plumber's Bane a chance at true power, and all they wanted was to maintain their pure-blooded status. Something went wrong with this response. Please try again." Trace ID, 3C099590-5CCB. Shift the story into the next chapter. Chapter 3, Worlds Collide. Opening. Gwen and Kevin arrive at Hogwarts under special permission. Magical barrier issues with Kevin's Osmosion abilities. Planning session with allies about protecting the artifacts. Rumors of attacks spread throughout school. Middle sections. Defensive preparations around school. Ben trains others in combining Muggle fighting with magic. Arcanist launches attack during special feast. Battle throughout Hogwarts. Great Hall. Moving staircases. Astronomy Tower. Ben cycling through transformations to counter different magical threats. Kevin absorbing magical materials creates unpredictable effects. Gwen's anodite abilities amplified by Hogwarts magical environment. Students and teachers fighting alongside trio. Callum reveals double agent status, helping Ben chase for the artifact through secret passages. Confrontation in Chamber of Secrets where final artifact is hidden. Ben trapped without Omnitrix access, forced to use purely magical abilities learned at Hogwarts. Omnitrix reactivates in response to extreme danger. New transformation unlocked. Magical/alien hybrid form ending final battle with Arcanus, who has partially combined artifacts. Ben's new form can directly counter the artifact weapon. Arcanus defeated but escapes. Aftermath and recovery. Discussions about Ben's future in Wizarding World offer to continue at Hogwarts. Part-time arrangements for ongoing cooperation between Plumbers and Ministry. Callum and Ben reach understanding. Return to Bellwood. With new perspective and abilities. Omnitrix permanently changed by magical exposure. Final scene showing Arcanus meeting with shadowy figure, planning next move. Now I have a solid outline that should allow me to write 3 chapters of at least 10,000 words each while maintaining the fast-paced style requested. The story has clear progression, character development, varied conflicts, and interesting integration of both universes. I'll now create a more polished story outline that I can present to the human before proceeding with writing the actual chapters. What if Ben 10 was a student at Hogwarts? Story outline. Overall plot. Ben Tennyson discovers he has magical ancestry through his paternal grandmother Verdona, whose energy manipulation abilities were actually a form of magic. After defeating mysterious magical creatures in Bellwood that his aliens struggle against, Ben receives a late acceptance letter to Hogwarts. Despite being 16 and years behind his peers, Headmistress McGonagall arranges for him to receive accelerated training. As Ben adapts to wizard life, he discovers the Omnitrix interacts with magic in unpredictable ways, sometimes enhancing his aliens' abilities, sometimes creating chaotic results. Meanwhile, a faction of dark wizards called the Plumber's Bane is hunting for ancient alien artifacts scattered throughout the wizarding world, technology left by Azmuth's ancestors who visited Earth centuries ago. These artifacts, when combined with magical enhancement, could create weapons of immense power. Ben must use both his Omnitrix and newly developing magical abilities to stop them while navigating the complex social landscape of Hogwarts. Character arcs. Ben Tennyson begins confident in his alien abilities but completely out of his depth in magical world. Initially tries to solve everything with the Omnitrix rather than learning magic. Gradually discovers magic enhances certain alien forms in unexpected ways. Develops a unique fighting style blending magic and alien transformations. Finds a new community and purpose at Hogwarts. Key supporting characters. Gwen Tennyson provides magical research support from distance, joins for final confrontation. Kevin Levin, skeptical of magic until he sees it firsthand during a crucial visit. Azmuth reluctantly provides information about his ancestors' connection to Earth magic. Alara Winters, Ravenclaw prefect who helps Ben navigate Hogwarts, potential romantic interest. Callum Blackthorn, Slytherin pureblood rival who initially despises Ben's Muggle technology. Professor Neville Longbottom, Ben's mentor who sees potential in combining alien powers with magic. Antagonists. Arcanus Void, former unspeakable obsessed with combining alien tech and magic to evolve, wizard kind. The Plumber's Bane, secret society believing magical beings should rule over muggles and aliens. Professor Nyx, defense against dark arts teacher with mysterious interest in the Omnitrix. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.